right, call the meeting to order, please. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. As per our requirements from the last year and a half or so since COVID, I read an opening statement because we have both virtual and in-person, so it's a little bit different than our normal procedure. So I'll read this and get us all started on the same page. So, good evening. This is the regularly scheduled July 14th meeting of the Geneva Planning and Zoning Commission. I am Scott Stocking, Chairman of the Commission. For tonight, the benefit of those in the audience, I'm joined by Commissioner Min Evans, Commissioner Mike Slifka, Commissioner John Mead, Commissioner Tim Moran, City Attorney Ron Sadek, Community Development Director David DeGroot, Assistant Planner Matt Busing, I think is that how you pronounce your name? Yeah. Who's relatively new for us. He's been here about a month, and Chayton True. Virtual attendees may watch or participate in the live stream meeting by accessing the link provided in the meeting agenda found on the city's website at www.geneva.il.us. For more information about meeting procedures or providing public comment, please see notice regarding meeting and public comment rule modification, a link to which is provided on the agenda for this evening's meeting. This evening, the Commission will host a public hearing regarding Agenda 5A. As the chairman of tonight's meeting, I'll guide the public, applicant, and commission through the public hearing process, which is outlined in the back of the meeting agenda. Please see this page for further details. The commission will open the public hearing, and the applicant will provide an opening statement and a brief overview of their request. Commission members will then have first opportunity to ask questions and make comments. This will be followed by public comment and testimony regarding the requests. Audience members will be called on virtually or in person. We usually go kind of City Hall first for 5 or 6 people, then we try virtual back and forth until we get everybody heard. We ask that you state your name and address when it is your turn to speak. If your comment has already been made or your question has already been asked, it is not necessary to repeat it. Remind members of the public to refrain from veering off topic or direct comments that are relevant to the requests being considered. At this time, I'd like to remind the Commission and members of the public that the Planning and Zoning Commission has very specific parameters and criteria to consider this when reviewing applications and providing recommendations. The Illinois state statutes and the Geneva City Code allow the Planning and Zoning Commission to carry out the following responsibilities, including but not limited to prepare and recommend the City Council to the City Council changes in the official plan as may be deemed necessary by the City Council or by the Planning and Zoning Commission, to give aid to the officials of the city charged with the direction of projects for improvements embraced within the official plan, to further the making of such improvements and generally promote the realization of the official plan, to hear and make recommendations to City Council on applications for special use permits, including planned unit developments, and to review the potential impacts of new development may cause regarding but not limited to traffic, property value, stormwater, and land use. Specifically regarding Agenda Item 5A, a requested special use for the concealed personal wireless communication tower, we remind those providing testimony that no local government may regulate the placement, construction, or modification of personal wireless facilities on the basis of environmental effects of radio frequency emissions per Section 332C7 of the Federal Communications Act. Simply stated, the Geneva and Planning Zoning Commission does not and will not consider testimony or make recommendations to the City Council based on comments which link health issues to radio frequency emissions. Now, if that testimony occurs during the meeting, I will stop you. If members of the public choose to testify discussing the link between these topics, they will be kindly reminded to focus their comments on issues that can be considered before the Commission, particularly those related to special use sought by the petitioner and the potential impacts on a new development may cause regarding, but not limited to, traffic, property values, stormwater, and land use. The special use requirements relevant to the matter and for public discussion and debate are identified on the board meeting room and can be found online at www.geneva.il.us. Following the end of the testimony, the applicant will have an opportunity to provide a closing statement and comprehensively answer questions or respond to any of the comments made from members of the public. Additional questions or comments may be stated by the commission, but public comment will not be reopened. The public hearing may then be closed, followed by a commission deliberation on the separate requests. Any person speaking during the public hearing agree and understand that anything they say will be considered sworn testimony and affirmed to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Commissioners, please state your name prior to speaking and prior to providing all roll call votes to better assist our record keepers. For example, stocking yea, nay, or abstain. Okay? So that's how we're going to proceed with the meeting this evening. Are there any questions? If not, yes, ma'am.
Why do we need more than 2 towers?
You'll have time during the public comment to talk about it. I'm just saying if you had any questions regarding what I just read, in terms of how, you'll have opportunity to speak at some point, but not right at this moment. No problem.
We love the enthusiasm.
So I do apologize, and I'm not sure I understood why you're refraining the questions to just, aesthetics, property values, business. What about the health?
I will turn that over to council.
This is a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. It is strictly under the guidelines of planning and zoning issues. The federal law, the FTC, prohibits this tribunal from addressing radio frequency issues or health issues associated with cell towers. That is not to be discussed here because this tribunal has no control over that.
Okay.
If you wanted to discuss that, how would you do it? I mean, not here, obviously.
Correct.
What is that?
That would be something with the federal government, unfortunately. The Federal Trade, the Federal Trade Commission Act of 1996 is absolutely black letter law. We do not have any jurisdiction here to discuss radio frequency health-related environmental matters with respect to a land use issue. We are confined to land use issues here. That's it.
Yes, sir.
What kind of land use issues would eliminate the tower? What kind of land use issues would come up that the commission might say, well, we can't put this tower?
As the chairman just stated, their examples are traffic, examples like stormwater, issues related to physical confines of the proposed use. Two components are up for this evening, a planned unit development amendment and a special use permit. There are guidelines, and I think they're set forth in the agenda with respect to the requirements for both items to be addressed by this tribunal.
Okay. Are there any other questions regarding this? No? Okay. Yes, sir.
Do that again.
Okay.
Future equipment areas, 3.
Sir, I don't want to interrupt you at this point, but you will have an opportunity to testify on specific parts of the application. I'm just asking if we have any questions regarding the general rules of running the meeting. You'll have ample opportunity to raise any and all objections or questions you have for the applicant. Okay, that's it. And I'm going to say it again. Right now, I'm going to swear everybody in who's going to provide testimony.
Roll call first.
Well, let's do the roll call.
Yeah.
I always try to do that.
Okay.
Do the roll call.
Stockings.
Here.
Mead.
Mead here.
Evans.
Evans here.
Slivka.
Slivka here.
Holloman. Mataskill. Moran.
Moran here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, now I'm going to administer the oath. Everyone who's going to provide testimony for this evening's meeting, please raise your eyes and raise your hand. Please rise. Raise your hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Jayton, do you have items on the record?
We'll do.
Oh, I'm sorry, got to do 2 and 3. I always jump over that. Okay, approval of the agenda.
Move to approve. Mead.
Second Evans.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the next one is approval of the minutes of the June 23rd, 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
Moran, move to approve.
Second, Evans.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So we have a single public hearing item on our agenda today. It's the 5A, it's the Verizon Tower at Oscar Swan, request for the amendments to the Blackberry Plan Unit Development and to allow the wireless communication facilities as special use, in addition to a special use to erect a 100-foot concealed wireless communication tower. The location is 1800 West State Street. The applicant is Tower North / Verizon Wireless. Okay, now, Jake, please read the items in the record.
All right, thank you, Chair. So the contents of this file include an application for an amendment to the Blackberry Planned Unit Development dated June 23, 2022, filed by Ray Schinkel on behalf of Tower North Development LLC, and a special use application dated December 1, 2021, filed by Mark Lane on behalf of Tower North Development LLC. These applications include the following items: project narrative for a planned unit development amendment, project plans, project overview and radio frequency RF affidavit, response to special use standards, value impact study, wind speed break point letter, tree preservation plan, tower photo simulations, owner authorization letter, land use opinion application, stormwater permit application, KDOT road impact fee application, and balloon test photos taken on May 24, 2022. The contents of this file also includes a copy of the letter to all property owners within 500 feet providing notice of the balloon test held on May 24, 2022. A copy of the letter to all property owners within 500 feet providing notice of the application being filed. A certification of publication from the Daily Herald for the legal notice that was published on June 25, 2022 for tonight's public hearing. A copy of the public hearing notice mailed to all property owners within 500 feet. A staff report from the Community Development Department to the Planning and Zoning Commission dated July 14th, 2022. And we also have a number of public comments that have been uploaded to the city's website for viewing for everybody. I do want to remind the commission, as it's been stated this evening, that there are some comments that involve the link between health impacts and radio frequency emissions. Just as a reminder, the Planning and Zoning Commission does not and will not consider testimony or make recommendations to City Council based on those items per section 332C7 of the Federal Communications Act. Marissa, can we possibly turn up the volume in the City Council chambers when you get a moment?
Okay, is that it, Jake?
That is it.
All right, very good. Okay, we'll hear from the applicant at this time.
Good evening.
Oh,
Chairman,
Yes, please identify your name.
Commissioners, my name is Ray Schinkel, and I'm with the Insight Team. My name is Ray Schinkel, Shinkle. And I'm with the Insight Team, here representing Verizon Wireless and Tower North, to present the special use application and the amendment to the PUD. So I know you have Chayton's staff report, which is very thorough, very professional report. He was a pleasure to work with over the last several months, by the way. And you have all of our submittals. So you're probably all familiar with these types of facilities. So don't worry, I'm not going to go through every bit of that information that Chayton presented. But I did prepare a PowerPoint to kind of hit on some of the important items and kind of discuss Verizon's site selection process and how we came to select this site as our primary. Then I can get into the RF maps and why they need that site here. And then I can get into the design and answer any questions or concerns you have regarding the photo simulations or the design. I'm also joined by Mark Lane, who was mentioned by Chayton's report. We worked together at Insight, and he submitted the application as well as I did. We worked together. We have Ari Rosenthal, who's with Ginsberg Jacobs. He's the attorney representing Verizon tonight. And on the phone is Jesse McDaniel, who's the radio frequency engineer who submitted the RF affidavit and explained the need for the site and how it benefits Verizon. So he couldn't be here tonight, but he is available. If we get any questions that we can't answer, we could always bring him in. So Verizon, the reason why we're here tonight is Verizon is trying to keep up with the insatiable demand that this country has for seamless wireless coverage. I'd be willing to bet everybody in this room has a similar device. It's become part of our lifestyle. Not only has the subscriber base grown tremendously, but the usage has grown tremendously. Especially in 2020 with the pandemic, the usage exploded. People aren't just using these phones for traditional phone calls. They're texting, they're emailing, they're using it as their video camera, their camera. They're posting things online, they're streaming videos. It's their calendar, it's their entire life that they have on this phone. Some statistics that I have is 90% of Americans own a wireless phone. 85% of those have a smartphone and use all those applications that I just mentioned. That's a 35% increase from 10 years ago. You have smartphone ownership in the 83% range from ages from 50 to 65, and 18 to 19 ages up at 96%. That tells you that the younger generation is cutting the landline. This is their only source of communication. So it's not just important for Verizon to keep up with the network for their customers and subscribers' personal business use, but it is a matter of health and safety to the public. We all watch the news. We all know what happens in tragedies and how important a reliable wireless network is. You have to be able to make these phone calls. 80% of 911 phone calls are made from wireless phones. Your emergency services department depend on wireless network, on Verizon's wireless network. The number one reason the elderly and children have phones is because their children or their parents want them safe. They want to know where they are, they want to be able to reach them, and they need them to make phone calls. So Verizon, being the number one carrier in the country, takes this very, very seriously, and they need to meet all these objectives. So Jesse, who's on the phone, has a job that he evaluates the network every single day. He has a certain section of the network. He looks at the data to tell him where possible drop calls or where there's spotty coverage. He looks at maximizing the existing network by adding radios and cabinets wherever he can. And when it gets to a point where there is nothing else they can do with the existing network, they have to add a site to offload the traffic. I like to use the analogy of installing a sprinkler system on your front yard. You want to place the sprinkler heads just so they just overlap with each other. If they're too far apart, you have a dead spot in your yard. If they're too close, you're covering an area that's already covered. Well, what about the spot where you're getting a lot of sun and there's no shade? You're going to have to add that other sprinkler in order to keep up with the coverage for that spot in your lawn. So it's similar to.
No, sir, no.
So again, you have the report, you have the RF affidavit. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I did put an important part of the report to explain his coverage need. He is trying to improve coverage. There's a ton of traffic along Route 38, Randall Road, Geneva Common Shopping Center, and all the surrounding neighborhoods and businesses around there. That is an area that he must maintain coverage. So what he does is when he sees an area that he needs to improve that coverage, he issues what the industry calls as a search ring. Just basically a circle on a map and gives it to someone like myself or Mark with the guidelines. Say, get us something in this area or close to it and get us at a certain height in order to meet the coverage objective. Now that map up there, that's the center with the arrow showing our proposed site tonight. So you can see that the desired search area was a little west of that along Randall Road. The blue and the light blue basically represents excellent coverage. If Jesse could have that everywhere, he'd be thrilled. But that's not always possible. So as you taper down to the green and yellow, now his confidence in that coverage starts to waver, and that's where you have the problem. So he has decided that we have to have a site somewhere in this area. Now, the first thing we look for is existing structures. The reason Verizon is partnered up with Tower North tonight is Verizon isn't in the tower business. They don't want to be in the tower business. They're in the wireless network business. They want these sites up and running as fast as they can. Your code also requires that they co-locate, but there's certain criteria we need to meet in order to make it work. You have to have an existing structure, which could be a rooftop, a water tank, a church steeple, anything. Does it fall in the area that we're looking for? Does it provide the height that we need? If it's a 20-foot rooftop, that's not going to do us any good. Is it structurally sound enough? Can we put our antenna facilities up there without it falling down? And then lastly, whoever owns the facility, will they lease us the space? Unfortunately, there are no other options in this area, and we have to look for a raw land. A raw land to erect a new communication facility, which is a difficult thing these days, trying to find a spot. So we immediately go to your code. And the code gives us a map or a guideline to follow to find one of these facilities, to find a property. And I thought it was interesting that the code opens up with saying that the city feels it's important to have a robust network, to work with the carriers to make sure that we're providing the best coverage possible while keeping the integrity and character of the neighborhoods. We feel we've done both here. So if you look at the site preferences, the first thing they look for is concealed freestanding towers. If there's nothing existing, the number one spot to look for that is on city-owned non-residential property. Unfortunately, there is no city property that's non-residential in this area. The second spot to look is other public property in non-residential zoning district, and that's exactly what we have tonight, a B1 zoning parcel. The other point is, if you're going to conceal it, the number one type is a tree naturally occurring or normally found in the geographical area. We are proposing a monopine. A pine tree is common in this area. And then last is, how do we get 100 feet? New concealed towers shall be limited to 100 feet. So that is how we got to this place. This is how we selected it. Mark submitted a report on everything he looked at, but this is the most obvious site that meets your requirements. You're not going to put a monopine tree behind a CVS pharmacy or a Menards in the middle of a parking lot. It doesn't work. But if you put it on a piece of property that's zoned B1, that has an existing tree canopy and the tree tower blends in with it, now you are meeting the requirement set by the city code. Once you put that site on air, it blends in perfectly and meets Jesse's requirements. This has a big impact. It offloads the traffic from the surrounding sites. It fills the gap of the coverage that he needs and exactly what he needs, and it's very important to him. So here's a bird's eye view of the property. You can see where the tower is located. It's a B1 zone. It's surrounded by R2 and R7 zoning. Here is a snapshot of the site plan. You can see that it's a 20 by 40 lease area. It includes the monopine. It includes the Verizon lease area. And it also includes a 20 by 40 extension for future co-locations, which again is a requirement per the city code to build a new facility to hold it for four carriers total. We've accomplished that here. Here is a view of the monopine. It's 95 feet to the tower, including a 5-foot lightning rod to the top. Here's a view of the landscaping plan. They're replacing the fence, and they're adding additional landscaping arborvitae all along the west side. They're adding landscaping to the south side, and the only trees that they are removing are buckhorn trees, which are a terrible tree, and dead ones. No trees will be removed that are not important to the area. Okay, photo simulations. Pictures tell 1,000 words. We did a balloon test where we had a crane with a balloon on top. We drove around for 4 hours. Nobody came to the photo simulation. Nobody. The only ones that came were...
Hey, guys, no interruptions during his presentation. You will have ample opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. I should clarify that when we were there, no one came up to the site, but I'm sure they could see it from far distances.
Sir, I'm not going to remind you again. You're not to interrupt this person during presentation. He's not going to interrupt while you talk.
Thank you, Chairman. So you have different views, and I know that Shane provided different views. I did not add everything in this. I just only added pertinent sites, but we can always pull up the staff report and look at additional views if you want. You can see the proposed antenna location below, and the view 1 is on your left. And you can see the before and after. The one on the top left is before, bottom left is after. That is a monopine cliffs blend in with trees. The one on the right is to the north. You can see the crane and the balloon on your top right, and below is the imposed monopine. Here's on your left. This is from the east looking west, and you can see the crane and the balloon on your left with the monopine below it. And then on the far right, we took it from the east view. You couldn't even see it. I drove around the area, and I was looking for it, and it was very difficult to see when you're driving up along Route 38 and all the different, and the trees blocking the view. One last view that I did take is at the end of the parking lot. You get a clean view of the crane and the balloon and how the monopine will sit there. That's the one unobstructed view you have without tree canopy blocking the majority of it. So, city staff and a third-party review. Your city hires Cityscape, which according to your staff review is an expert at reviewing wireless communication applications. And they found that our application meets all of the city requirements regarding a special use. They signed off and approved this. If you read through your staff report and their finding of fact, all of their items believe that we meet all those items of finding of fact. I think that's an important statement to know that we are meeting the objectives. We think this is a win-win site. The proposed site is in harmony with the city zoning code for placement of new antenna facilities. The new site will allow Verizon to continue to provide seamless coverage in the Geneva community and meet the city emergency services requirements. And the site is well disguised while offering a co-location opportunity to additional carriers. So we think it's a win-win site. I know that people are going to come up, they're going to talk about property values. Mark submitted his report on what he feels. I think there's no denying over the last 20 years that property values have increased, and there is no direct correlation that any of those property values were damaged because of proximity of cell tower. You have cell towers that are monopoles and lattice towers in the city of Geneva. They're part of the landscape. They're like power lines. We need these towers in order to provide this network. What we're proposing tonight is a monopine where you can only see the top of the tower. I want to keep that in mind. If you go on the internet, you're going to find articles from 2007 or 1995 about property values. But how is there a direct correlation that these property values would be damaged? I can't imagine you're going to find that. So we are here to answer any questions and the honest questions. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
All right. Questions from the commissioners? John?
Can you do me a favor? Just put up before and after coverage maps again.
Sure.
I'm interested in what happens to the inside the circle where the issue is driven from today.
Oh, John, can you put your mic on?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I've asked for him
So
to put up the
this is-
current and
This is the
proposed.
coverage as of today. And this was the area that they give us a guideline. Now, I want to remind you, this is just, the search area is a guideline.
Right.
And it's a fluid situation. When you're looking for existing structures, you have to be able to discredit it. Would RF like to literally pinpoint and drop wherever they could? They can't do that.
Right.
They have to work around existing structures, towers, water tanks, rooftops, and then be flexible with that. It's not always a perfect situation.
Right. So when I look at that, I see, you called it blue, I call it purple, but.
Yeah,
you've
right,
got the-
purple, right.
And then you've got the light blue. You've got spots of the green, which are poor coverage, maybe drop calls, or at least, overloaded network. So when you put the tower in, I'm looking for that, what happens to the green, maybe if you just, okay, so it looks like within, you go to all blue within the circle, and it does have an effect farther west. But at some point, there's going to need to be something to address the stuff
Right.
along Peck
You have to-
Road, I would assume, right?
Now, what you have to notice is that he only submitted the towers that were closest to. He did not submit the sites that are on the east or west. He didn't submit the entire map. There is
Okay.
a site you can see
To the
in the
west, I
submittal.
think, right?
Yeah. In his submittal, he talks about all the surrounding sites, but on this RF propagation map, he did not show those.
Okay.
So it wasn't, he only showed the immediate coverage.
But the before coverage is the coverage as it exists with all the towers. And then this is just the impact from this tower.
Correct. This is what we're trying to cover this area. We wanted to show how this impacts the area. We weren't talking about the entire city coverage.
Right. So this is driven a lot by, as I take it, traffic on Randall, traffic on Route 38 with volume of traffic. A lot of people at Geneva Commons.
Correct.
Parking and shopping on their cell phones and doing whatever we do. So that drove this as a primary first site. I'm assuming that at some point Verizon will want to address the other green areas or yellow areas.
Again, it's not depicting what's on air or what's
Right.
planned, but yes, it is a constant, he is constantly pursuing it.
Right.
And could we come back here with another Oscar Swan type site in Geneva in the future? I'm sure we'd have to meet all the requirements we're meeting
Right.
tonight.
Right.
But
But I'm just trying to understand,
Yeah. And it's-
obviously
you
this is
have
a
to-
priority site for you.
I think what is most telling, if you had a chance to read Jesse's affidavit, he speaks at length about capacity and how capacity, it's hard to show that on a map. But there are certain times of the day where the sites are just getting overloaded,
Right.
and the only way to do that is to add another site. But capacity is a major challenge for the carriers now, not so much coverage, but when you get in certain areas, they just have to add sites to offload that traffic.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ma'am?
I recall from the last time this came up with the proposed site over near Eagle Brook, there was also the option for the shorter tower that didn't look like a giant pine tree. Did you consider that here, and can you show us on any of these photos what the difference would be if it was 20 feet shorter?
Well, again, I'm following your city code. Your city code requires a 100-foot stealth tower and requires four carriers to be on a tower. If I'm going to lower that, that is going to kill the opportunity for four co-locations. It's also going to have an impact. It's all line of sight, right? So I drop it 20 feet, that coverage is going to shrink. But more importantly, I'm following your code. Your code requires 100 foot for a concealed tower and to have it for four carriers. We've done that tonight. I'm just following the code.
Can I piggyback off that? So if you lower it by 20 feet, are you saying that because of the existing tree canopies, you can't get another 3 providers on there because you stagger them on a pole, I'm assuming, right?
Right, there's a standard separation. You can't all be on the same center line.
Right.
So the lower you go, the less attractive it's going to be for AT&T, T-Mobile, or Dish.
Okay.
So that's the case. They can't consider something at the 80-foot, because it seems to me in Eagle Brook, there was discussion of the 80-foot tower.
Yeah, just to clarify, the code does not require a concealed tower to be 100 feet. It allows a concealed tower to go up to 100 feet. If it's not a concealed tower, it's limited to 80 feet maximum.
So it could be at 80 feet. It doesn't have, the code doesn't say it has to be the 100-foot
Doesn't have
pine
to.
Do
tree.
you still need 4 additional carriers?
3 additional.
Or 3 additional carriers, 4 total? I could pull up the code if you need.
I would have to look at that.
Yeah, I think you should, because it's important for co-location.
I believe that's correct, but we can verify that.
Jesse's on the phone?
Jesse is available if we would like to.
Jesse's on the phone.
Jesse?
Could he speak to what height he could drop it to accommodate 4 you providers?
So the tree cover is 60 feet. Jesse, we're going to ask you, I don't know if you guys, how you guys can check him to allow him to speak. But Jesse, if you could speak on a matter if they would prefer lowering it from 100 to 80, how would that impact your coverage?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we
This
can.
is,
Speak up, though.
Jesse. Yeah, this is Jesse McDaniel. I'm a radio frequency engineer with Verizon Wireless, and I work out of 1701 Gulf Road in Rolling Meadows, Illinois. And yes, I can speak to the height. If we lower it to 80 feet, it's possible I may lose coverage, along Randall Road, right? And cover that traffic along there. But so I preferably, I would like to be at 100 feet. Now, the question is that so the tower is at 100 feet, but then our antenna center line is actually at 90 feet, right? So if we go 80 feet, will we actually be lower than 80
Yes,
feet?
the lightning rod is included in the height, so we'd be at 75.
So 75 feet. Yeah, so for my objective, 75 feet will not work for me.
Now, if 75 feet won't work for Verizon,
Five.
you're going to be hard pressed to find a co-location at 65 or 55.
Michael?
So are 80 and 100 feet the only two choices? I mean, does maybe 90 work?
You're talking 10 feet off the monopine makes that big of a difference? And it's going to hurt co-location? Is that what we want to do here? I mean, are we
I
trying to
don't-
meet an
I'm
objective
asking.
here to provide public safety and coverage and also make it attractive for co-location? I think we're starting to split hairs here. But if you want to ask him if he could take 85 feet, I mean, you're moving up 10 feet, so that's going to help his coverage, but I think it's important to keep it at 95 feet and offer co-location to future carriers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tim?
I had a couple of questions. Tell me about 5G and in this context. So one of the bases of the proposal is that as it currently stands, there is a threat or maybe even the current reality that calls, possibly very important calls, are being dropped, and that's at the current 3G and 4G level. But 5G is on the horizon. We know the FCC's put a stop on it to a certain extent for reasons which we don't need to get into. But if they don't put a tower in, not necessarily this tower, at what point will this affect the ability to transmit in strong 5G as in other areas?
Well, the RF affidavit tells you that he is seeing a coverage deficiency that is only going to get worse over time, and that a macro site is going to have the biggest impact on the site. A lot of people have asked, what about using small cells? Why can't you cover this with small cells? Small cells are a big part of Verizon's network, but they are only a complement. Adding small cells to this area will not even compare to what this macro site will provide for the area. Could he be adding small cells in the area to complement this? Very likely. Could it happen 2 years, 10 years, 15 years? Yes. But am I right, Jesse? And do you want to elaborate on some of that and how important this is and how it compares? If you were not allowed this site, how would it impact the network?
Yes, I can expand on that. All right. So, and I believe our affidavit is very clear, right? There's a need here, and there has been a need here for a while. And this site, it hits two objectives, right? As Ray has already spoken on. One is that the coverage deficiency, meaning that we're not pleased with the coverage, and there's a gap here. But it also is a capacity issue, right? So we have surrounding sites that we had on air for years, but a sector of a site can only handle so much traffic at one time, right? And we're seeing the traffic on these sectors are starting to build and become a problem, and we have to offload that traffic, right? So this site, will hit that objective and offload the 6 sectors in the area, and which 4 of those sectors are completely exhausted and need immediate relief. And if we don't get this site, this capacity probably will only get worse over time, right? And to answer Ray's question about small cells, although small cells are part of our network plan and they play an important part, and we will continue to build them, but they are not the solution here. Small cells cannot replace a macro. They cannot operate on their own. They complement a macro, right? So this macro will be extremely important part of our network and for our customers, right? And just adding a bunch of small cells will not have the same impact as a macro. And quite frankly, we need this site, and we are very excited about this site, right? So again, small cells cannot replace a macro site.
And I thank you, but my question really wasn't about small cells. I understand the distinction. I've read the report. I also live across the street from the Logan Street water tower, which is covered in cell coverage, which for 27 years hasn't bothered me a bit. And if I thought it would work, I'd say go ahead and put them over there, but according to your report, it's too far away.
That's correct.
So my question is that if this isn't built now, at what point, given the increasing demand, would this become so unreliable that it would be a threat to public health and safety?
Alderman? Commissioner, excuse me, Commissioner, I don't understand your question, why you would want to wait for that. We talked about tragic instances that have happened recently and how important a robust network is to the community. If you can't make those calls, that's a very terrifying thing. The RF engineer is looking at the network to avoid that from happening. If it's gotten to the point where calls are dropping and people can't use their phone, that is a problem. And he is anticipating, he is looking at that, he is trying to be in front of that so that you never have that issue. Waiting until it's a problem, I think is a big mistake.
I would agree with that, and that really wasn't the nature of my inquiry. I'm just anticipating some of the comments from this evening from people who live around there and want them to understand that, based on what you were saying in the reports and the data that I see, that the failure to construct something, not necessarily this in this spot, but the failure to construct something in the not too distant future is going to make a problem even worse.
That is correct. And if this site isn't approved, knowing we have followed your code as a guide, I would really like to know what alternative site you have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Miss?
I'm looking at your map, and in particular, the one before this that showed current coverage. And I'm wondering what documentation you have to say that the service is unreliable in residences. Do you have a list of complaints from customers, or do you have some kind of measurement? How do you determine that?
Well, Commissioner, I hope you read through the RF affidavit that Jesse submitted, but Jesse, would you like to elaborate and answer the Commissioner's question, please?
Yes, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question, please?
Jesse, you're going to have to really get close to the microphone and speak up because you're a little muffled. But Commissioner, if you don't mind repeating your question.
Yes, my question is, how have you determined that the service is unreliable? Do you have how do you document that?
Jesse, her
Okay,
question is, how do you determine a site is needed here? Now, I can tell you that they're not going to build a $500,000 facility. This is probably closer to $750,000 with a site that they don't need. So I could tell you that, but Jesse, maybe you want to elaborate on how you determine there is a coverage deficiency and why we need this new macro. What data is driving that?
Okay, so yes, if you guys can hear me.
Yes.
We look at the coverage area, right, and determine whether there's a coverage deficiency. But we also look at capacity metrics, right? And I can't give you guys those metrics because they're part of our competitive advantage and proprietary to Verizon. But we look at a number of users connected to the site, data throughput performance, and what the facilities at the site can handle, and determine the capacity needs to continue to handle those volumes of calls and data for our customers. And to be honest with you, if this site, where it's at, it's a home run for us, right? And it would have an immediate impact to our network. And again, I can't stress how, excited we are about this site if we can get this site on air and improve our network and improve the coverage and performance for our customers.
Hey, Jesse, this is Ray. So in your report and the sworn affidavit that you submitted, which is a requirement per the city code, you had mentioned that I believe 4 to 6 sectors were failing at capacity. Is that correct?
Yes. And as I mentioned before, there's this site will offload 6 sectors in the area, and which 4 of those sectors are completely exhausted. Right.
When you say sectors,
and this site will,
Jesse, just in layman's terms, sectors are the surrounding sites have 3 sectors facing in 3 different directions. So the sectors
Correct.
of the surrounding sites facing this area are at full capacity. They are failing. That's how he takes that data and says, we need to do something, and we need to do something quickly. It's all part of the sworn statement. But he can't provide the actual data because of the competitive advantage.
that's correct.
Thank you, Jesse.
Have there been complaints? I mean, let's just address the room full of people here who live in this area that would benefit from this service. If the service was currently inadequate, have they?
Commissioner, I don't have customer complaints, but I can tell you that there's a sworn statement submitted from RF engineer explaining to you in detail why they need the site and why important it is. That's the best I can do for you, and that is a requirement per your code. But do I have customer complaints from the area? No, I do not.
So, to piggyback off Mim again, Jesse, the data that you use is not necessarily the operating system today. It's data around demand or users within an area and projecting some level of growth and anticipating a problem at some point so as to avoid the problem?
Jesse, did you hear that question, or you need me to repeat it?
No, I heard it, Keith. Yes, I heard it. So
Please.
yes, we use data to project the traffic, but then also we're using data, for today. And as I mentioned, 4 of those sectors that the site will offload are completely exhausted as of today, right? And need immediate relief.
So would that mean that those 4 sectors that are completely exhausted, as you put it, would they be experiencing issues from those sectors today if they're exhausted?
Yes, during peak hours, those sites will have some performance issues and not operate optimally to our standards.
And I'm not asking for the specific data if that's proprietary, but you have data that supports that there are dropped calls or slow uploads, downloads, whatever the case may be for those 4 sectors you're talking about?
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Tim, you're good?
I'm good.
Michael?
Thank you.
John, anything else?
I'm right, for right now, I'm good.
Anything else?
Not right now.
Point? Okay. All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. We're going to assistance. Okay, we're going to open up the public hearing portion of the meeting. And I'm going to go by the order that you're on the registration sheets, which I have in front of me. So we'll just start with City Hall first. We'll take, 5 or 6 people here, and then we'll go to virtual, online and so forth, and go back and forth until everybody has a chance to speak. So first person on the list is, I believe it's M.M. Chalicki.
Actually, my husband.
And, okay, you're Chuck?
Yes.
Okay, please come forward. Just state your name and address.
Name's Chuck Chalicki, 540 Dempsey
Want to
Place.
spell your last name, please?
Chillicki.
And I'm Peggy Chilicki, same residence.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks for letting me come up here and voice my opinions. I guess this is all about putting a cell tower 70 feet from my neighbor's backyard. I don't really understand how you can do that when it doesn't necessarily have to be there. It's outside their circle, or quarter-mile circle from the commons. Why are we there? Okay. Section E, Article 11.312 of the Geneva Code on the response to it. It says, real estate specialists did identify several non-public properties and non-residential zoning districts which were considered, but could not come to terms with the property owners. So they're proposing this 1800 Oscar Swan. I can't believe that you're not going to come to terms with, it's a business transaction. Is it too much money? But if it's too much money, we found the spot where it falls in our budget. Guy 70 feet from it, he's got the 70-foot cell tower in his backyard. How's he ever going to sell this place? So that's my first opinion. Secondly, property values. Is Mr. Lane here? Mark Lane? Okay. Can I ask you a few questions?
Sir, you just ask me the questions,
Oh,
and we'll
okay.
make sure he answers them later.
All right, Mr. Lane did this localized property value impact study presentation. He collected 18-month sales data, half-mile, mile, and 2-mile radius from an identified tower broken down by square feet of gross living area. Had a little bit of trouble understanding his graph, but I think I figured it out. It's sale price over square footage gives you a number. I don't know if he did a average or a median, get that number, and he said it was kind of flat. What happened to the data from 0 feet to a half mile? And this is 70 feet, so I'd like some data on 70 feet from a cell tower. Does that affect your property value? Okay. Another question is, I'd like to know if Mr. Lane is licensed in the state of Illinois to appraise real estate property.
Okay?
I'd like to know that. Okay. Peggy and I are the original owners. We've been over 30 years on the Dempsey Place address. We were there with the Millers, the Snyders, the Shiners, the Signs, the Salisbury, the Kins, and Elvins. We built that area. It was farmland when we moved in. We grouped it together, we got together, we made it a warm, friendly place to come. We're proud of what we built, and we wanted to pass that on to the younger generation. That's a character of Geneva we were proud of. So we're fighting to preserve that tradition. We understand Verizon's needs, maybe. We have a lot of might happens, might happen. Here again, you're throwing a cell tower in a residential area 70 feet from a neighbor because it might happen. I don't know how they got data off of Randall Road and 38. I mean, I don't know how they know that there's so many cars going by and they can't get cell service, okay? I don't know how that happened. 9/11, I don't know, I hear that we don't see any 9/11 issues. The area they want to put that in is kind of built. I mean, there's just really nothing else that can go in there. I don't know how we're going to get all this swath of data that's going to come in, and we need this. As far as supporting the commons, I guess everybody in back of me is going to say, put it in the commons if the commons needs it. The commons has a lot of vacant properties. It's not growing. It's not going to really demand any new service. Okay. I don't think there's anybody in this room, maybe there is, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, who would want a cell tower 100 feet, 70 feet from their property line. Anybody will raise their hand and say, I'll take it? No, I don't see anybody. Okay. Our data does show. We asked several residents who just moved into the area, did you know about the cell tower? And they said, no. I said, would that affected your decision? Yes. We're kind of upset we didn't know about it. So that was several residents who just moved in on the Dempsey property. We have no actual photos of this post cell tower. We have drawings. We have photoshopped where this cell tower is going to go and what's going to look like, but we have no photos. I mean, I would think they would have, here's a photo of the tree we're putting in color, see what it looks like. Here's what the antennas are going to look like when they're hidden. Don't have any. I had to go to Google and Google cell tower trees, and what I got was, my wife described it as Pinterest failures. It looked like, seriously, it looked like somebody took a cell tower and glued tree branches on it. I mean, it's terrible. I haven't seen anything, you know. So if we move forward on this, I would certainly like to see a tree. What are you going to put in here? We have no idea. We've seen the drawings, don't know. Okay. Again, it's out of their area, their quarter-mile radius. It doesn't have to be there. Our property values are going to get affected, especially my neighbor who's going to be on top of. And I'd ask you, you know, let's put that someplace else away from this residential areas. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, next one is Lisa Thyman, I think it is, 366 Colonial Circle? Okay, okay.
One of the questions I have, I'm not going to repeat what he said. I absolutely agree. We're relatively new to the neighborhood. Would I have moved there if I had been aware of this? I don't think so. So I do want to, we moved in March 2021, so a disappointment. A clarification. One of the things that I've heard a couple of times is that this is site number 1, but I thought that there was a previously proposed site in Eagle Brook, and we've referred to it a couple of times this evening. So this is not the first site that would have taken up that slack that they've described. So I'm troubled by that, and we all know that that site wasn't built for some of the same concerns that people are going to express this evening. And so I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding how a somewhat more densely populated area, the argument may be, well, that's exactly why you need it, is going to be impacted by that 100-foot tower that was not okay, or maybe that was tower number 1 over there, that was not okay in another location in our relatively near neighbored. So I'm concerned about that, and I'd like to understand that a little bit better. But I won't echo exactly what they said because I couldn't agree more. What a disappointment.
I think it's Mike Reitz, 1943 Blackberry Drive.
Good evening. This is Mike Reitz from, as you said, 1943 Blackberry Drive. Whoa. I just have basically, I wanted to bring up a comment or a question, because I was looking through the packet earlier today, and on one of the pages, I think it was page 74, there's a picture of the balloon test location from down the road. And I was kind of wondering, well, that to me didn't look like it was a 100-foot tall crane. So when I printed it off, I did a few measurements, and the man in the picture, even if I assume he's 6 foot tall and extrapolate and measure, that crane's only about 63, 65 foot high. So I'm just wondering if that was what the balloon test was, and all the other pictures were taken with that same picture, we kind of got inaccurate view of what those pictures would look like. So I just wanted to bring that up as a point. And
Okay.
I'm against this tower as well. So.
Okay. All right, we'll get that answered. All right, thank you, sir. Don Sprague, 2169 Clover Lane.
Yes. Thank you very much. I have a concern, the same concerns that were raised, and I have a couple additional concerns. If they did the RF propagation study, why aren't they moving behind Lowe's and those places out there where there's some open fields? Why put it in a residential area where we built the property value up We pay our taxes, and this thing does not bring us any value. The cell site itself doesn't bring nothing to us. In fact, it diminishes the people on Dempsey. The other thing is, I've been around cell sites. I know when it goes in, it's going to be beautiful. And then about a year from now, the mice will be in there. Could be homeless people in there. I've cleaned them out where there's been homeless people. We're taking a community, a residential area, and we're putting a cell site in there where the cell sites normally are somewhere behind a business, they're out in an open field, they're in a cornfield, Kane County Fairgrounds it could be, all those places it could be, but why in a residential area where we got lots of young kids running around? It just doesn't make sense. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir. Please, ladies and gentlemen, no applause. Let's just hear the comments and move forward. Jerry and Sue McMillan, I think it is. I'm sorry, I can't read their last name. 550 Dempsey?
That is correct. Commissioners, and it's Jerry Miller and 550 Dempsey Place. Our background, my wife and I, we built on that property after looking at lots of other properties in the surrounding area. And for a bit of background, we come from the banking industry. As former bank regulators, myself, she is a real estate lender. So we spent time looking at the PUD and made that choice, hopefully never to see a tower or a junkyard or anything else in our backyard. Instead, we were surprised when this was put out there for public hearing. Retired for a while, so I'm no longer in that industry, but I thought I'd reach out to some people who are still there and have some, what I feel, valuable insight. So I reached out to Jim Coleman. I think many of you know Coleman Land Properties, and asked him his thoughts. I'm quoting, "The proposed tower site is not in keeping with the residential character of the neighborhood." And he further added that the cell tower, if allowed, the character of this residential neighborhood will be changed forever. I also reached out to Tim Nelson, who is an architect, well known in this area. He's lived here his whole life. And he noted that although an attempt has been made to disguise the proposed structure, particularly the tower, that it will be visible from nearby residents. Furthermore, he noted that the pictures provided do not show the proposed structure in a winter setting. And with many of the surrounding trees having no foliage, you're going to have one pine tree, so to speak, standing up there. He also pointed out that at 100 feet, the tower will be the tallest structure in the area. I also reached out to a real estate broker, people who sell property, or at least broker it and help people relocate to this area. Her name is Miss Tiffany Reilly with Keller Williams here in Geneva. And she noted, first of all, providing an attachment, a checklist that she goes through with people when they move to the area. Where would you like to move? And in the areas there, the first set of questions, areas you don't want to move, next to a railway yard, in an earthquake zone, floodplain, next to a cell tower. And that's the sheet that people look at and steer away from properties. She also said that potential buyers will generally look elsewhere for a home. Ms. Reilly concluded that some buyers are concerned that it presents an eyesore and detracts from the residential feel of the neighborhood. I concur with the gentleman who talked about the height, and I went a step further and went over to a crane operator who's doing structure in the former St. Charles area where Burger King used to be, those apartments. And they have a crane up there, and I thought it was over 100 feet. So I asked him, how do you know how tall it is? All he had to do was go in his cab and look at the dial and could tell me immediately it was 140 feet. I also believe that balloon test was not 100 feet, based on my own personal experience of climbing 50-foot silos in my youth. In summary, there's a lot of studies out there from Alabama, Georgia, Florida, that talk about real estate value going down, particularly less than a half mile from a tower. And I sent those in as attachments to Mr. True, along with my comments. And I also agree with the impact study. I could not make heads or tails out of the values. And that comes after years of cutting data and also defending against the Department of Justice. I'm used to cutting data, and I have to take that as almost, it was skewed to help the business proposition of what Verizon is trying to do. So in all due respect, I do request that this commission deny this application. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Next person on the list is Lynn McHale, 564 Bradbury Lane.
Good evening. I have a couple of questions. The first one is this a preferred site due to the cost of the lease being offered at a lower rate than possibly other sites? I'd like to know the answer to that. And then the other carriers that would be attached to the site, whom do they pay rent to? Does it go to the Oscar Swan or does it go to Verizon? And then lastly, the owner of Oscar Swan is an elderly woman. I don't believe Oscar Swan is doing as well as it has in the past. So what are the provisions being made for if she decides to sell her property? You're leasing a part of her land to put the cell tower on. And so how does that work when she goes to sell? I don't know about that. And lastly, I would say too that I personally am against having the tower put at Oscar Swan. I also just, as a note, I'm the president of the Condo Association for Williamsburg Village, and I'm not speaking for them as a whole, but just wanted to let you know I'm here with many other residents from our neighborhood who are against this. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next person is Allison Kowalski, 558 Bradbury, Geneva. Allison? If you don't want to speak, you don't have to, but if you want to, please come forward.
Everyone
Please.
on the list is going to be called forward?
Yes,
It's not-
you
oh,
put
okay.
on the list on here saying you wanted to testify. That's why I called
Oh,
your name.
that's what that Well, yes, I also live
But you
in-
don't have to. It's up to you.
Well,
if
I
you're
am
not
against it
comfortable.
also, just
Okay.
because,
Could
I
you please
mean,
state your name, spell your last name, please?
Allison Kozlowski, Kozlowski.
All right, thank you.
And, yeah, I just know that it could be just a little bit pushed toward the west, and there's all kinds of property out there. This is a very densely populated area, and I'm just, for what everyone else has said, I'm in total agreement and oppose it completely.
All right, okay, thank you. And then Brad, you're also on the list, okay. Barb Cagney, I think it is? No? Okay. You just thought it was a sign-in sheet, they're just, that's fine. Laura, I think it is? Kara.
If I just want to state my opinion and don't actually have a question, may I go up?
Yes, please.
My name is Kara, K-A-R-A, Desideri, D as in David, E-S-I-D-E-R-I. I live at 550 Bradbury Lane. I am opposed to the construction of this cell tower, and my number one reason is the reason that you don't want to discuss here. But other than that, my comments would be, I've lived at 550 Bradbury Lane since June of 2005. I have worked at the Kane County Courthouse right there on 38, very close to the cell tower, since June of 1996. Not once in my whole life being in this area did I ever have a call dropped. And until very recently, I had the same phone for 8 years that was 3G, not once ever a call dropped. Nobody in my family in the area ever had a call dropped. Also, I think that the argument that children wouldn't be able to call 911 is not really a valid one, because most people who have a cell phone have a code on it. And the young children, if you have young children in your home, I imagine you probably get a landline so that your kids can call 911 if they need to, and not figure out how to turn your cell phone on and what your code is, especially when they're very young. So I am very much opposed to it, and thank you.
All right, thank you. Next person is Bethany Simpson, 341 Colonial Circle. Don't want to speak? Okay. Tom Nagy? Nagel? 408 Wakefield.
Tom Nagel, 408 Wakefield Lane, Negle, Verizon customer. No complaints. Just echoing a lot of the other people's comments here that we don't think that this is a good site for this tower. It's right next to residential area. It's going to be a blight on property value, and that's why I'm voicing my concern for this issue here and urging you guys to reject it.
All right, thank you, sir. Fred Eddy, 2266 Blackberry, I think it is.
Thank you. I will mention, I think I'm one of the original owners in the neighborhood. I've been there 32 years. And I may have misunderstood their presentation, but I thought they had mentioned, so one of my questions is, I thought they had mentioned that due to the traffic and the high volume, that they have to make decisions on where coverage gaps occur. And when I look at their map about current coverage gaps and even the future, you see a lot of green, right? A lot of green where we've got problems for a long time. If it's true, if I understand them correctly, that they are making the determination today where a coverage gap occurs. That's their decision that our area is being created a gap versus, let's say, someplace out west. Okay, so if they have that ability to say who's going to get a call dropped and who's not going to get a call dropped, our area is getting the call dropped. Now, they've got to make that decision on something, right? I mean, somebody's going to have a call dropped. But I think the problem that we have is that we're going to have coverage gaps all over the place for 10, 15, 20 years unless technology changes. And so therefore, we should start putting these towers places where people don't live, because we're going to have that problem anyway. So I vote that we don't put this tower where it's going to affect the property gaps or property values. Secondly, and I don't necessarily want to repeat what one gal just mentioned, but landlines. Most people that need to call 911 are older generation people. And I'm not sure how many of us still have landlines, but I think most of us do have landlines. And so the idea that this is for health and safety, I don't think is as big a deal as it sounds like it is, because most of us still have landlines. And the last thing, Mr. Moran, you had brought up 5G. I don't know where the future technology is going, but we could make a decision here, and 5 years from now, technology changes like that, and we're looking at this Christmas tree in the middle of winter, thinking, what did we do that for? Look what technology has done. So I think we need to be cautious. I think we need to put it places where people are not concerned with, and let's see where technology takes us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I got John Martins, 512 Bradbury Lane.
My name is John Martins, Martens. I have a question. Is when Mr. Schinkel, is his name, from Verizon spoke and he started out, he said that this site was their primary site. And so being a sophisticated big business company, they must have looked at other sites. I would like to know what the secondary site is so the commission knows when they turn this down where it might be going next. So that was one thing I would like to.
I mean, I could just speak for that. Since I've been on the commission, we've had at least one cell tower site, maybe two, that's been denied in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So it's clearly they keep coming back, so there is a there's a
Okay.
need, from their perspective, there's a service need. That's all I can say, is
Yeah.
that that's been the history in the last couple of years.
And when I asked the question in the beginning, and I was, and I understood now that there's no health issues to be discussed, because that's done by the Federal Communications. And so that was a lot of the concern that's going to affect property values, and I think a couple of the gentlemen that came up here were right on the money. It's, and the lady that spoke, that property values aren't going to be determined in this area by, they're going to be determined by health issues. They're going to be, people aren't going to want to live near a cell tower. I mean, this is our community. We don't have to put this in our community. We can put this outside on the other side of Randall Road. By the map that was shown, it looked like it would be better on the other side of Randall Road than on this side of Randall Road, where there's less dense population. So I'm against this tower, and I think that everybody on the commission and the board should really have to think deep about this issue, because it's a lot more concern than you might think.
Thank you, sir. I've got Jean Prozek?
My husband will be speaking.
Okay. Chris?
Yes.
It's 355 Colonial Circle?
Yes. Chris Perozek, 355 Colonial Circle, Perozek. My wife and I have lived probably within 100 feet of this proposed tower for 32 years. Service has always been fine. We're also Verizon customers, so never an issue with that. I won't reiterate too many of the other comments, but one, if not in Eagle Brook, why us? I'd love to know that. I would like to know if there's any lights on this tower at night. I don't know if anybody knows that off the top of their head. No?
Well, we'll get it answered. So.
All right. Will there be any noise from any equipment at the tower? That's another question. I would echo too, let's place it out west where there's far less dense. The balloon test being done in the summer with full foliage was, I think, a little bit deceptive. In the winter, 6 months out of the year, when there's no leaves, it's going to be far more visible. And the impact study keeps going out to like 1 or 2 miles. You're getting so many more houses. The houses that are within X number of 100 yards or so, those are the houses that are impacted. You're just diluting the price impact when you go out 1 to 2 miles and get so many more houses. I think that's kind of a ridiculous tool, if you will. That's my statement, very much against this.
All right, thank you, sir. Joanne Ward, 2022 Wellington Court? No? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm glad you reminded me. We just kept right on going, so we got some momentum. So we're going to do some online right now. I forgot about that. So if you're online and you wish to speak on this matter, please use the raise hand function on your application and you'll be recognized to speak. So again, there's a raise hand function on your application. Please utilize it so you can be recognized to speak to the commission.
Right, the commission now calls upon Bruce Stern. Bruce, please proceed to unmute yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Bruce, are you with us? Nope. Bruce, please unmute yourself if you're with us.
There we go.
There you go. Now we hear you.
Had trouble getting the mute turned off, and I apologize.
Please
my
state
name
your
is Bruce
name and your...
Stern.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm at 362 Colonial Circle, and sitting next to me is my wife, Sylvia, at the same address, and we both have comments. I'd like to ask her to make her comments first, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, hi, I'm Sylvia Stern.
We strongly oppose the Verizon tower proposal at Oscar Swan because it's in direct opposition to standard for special use number 2, which states that the proposed building or use will not diminish the value of adjacent and nearby properties. Verizon says that there is no evidence, and this is in quote, to suggest that the presence of communications facilities, such as the one proposed, would have a negative impact on the value of nearby or adjacent properties, and backs up this claim with a property value impact study prepared on January 20, 2022. The proposal displayed dark and difficult to understand photographs of the 4 tower locations that were the basis for the study. So last month, my husband Bruce and I decided to drive to those 4 cell phone tower locations. Then on July 3rd, we sent an email to City Planner Chayton True with our criticism of the study based on our observations of the 4 actual tower sites. In summary, our July 3rd email stated that the 4 towers on which the study is based are on undeveloped land. There are no adjacent residential properties. And with the email, we included images from Google Maps to demonstrate that. The proposed Oscar Swan Tower site, on the other hand, is in a fully developed area. It would be immediately adjacent to residences on 3 sides, plus a nursery school, and a business district adjacent to the 4th side. Second, the Verizon study looked at the impact on property values within a radius of 1/2 mile, 1 mile, and 2 miles from the towers, which has been already alluded to by other speakers this evening. This is in contrast to the proposed tower site at Oscar Swan, which is 500 feet from a large number of homes, many, many more homes that are within 1,000 feet of the proposed site. And most troubling is that some homes are as close as 70 feet from the proposed site. In closing our email, we stated that the Verizon study has no relevance to the area where it now wants to place a tower. In fact, the Oscar Swan Tower site is highly problematic. There are homes in our neighborhood that back up directly to Oscar Swan. The tower, if approved, would be 70 feet from the property line of those residences. Sheets L3 and L4 of the Verizon proposal show that the site is adjacent to what is referred to as Lot 35, Lot 36, Lot 37, Lot 38, and Lot 39. What these sheets do not show is that those lots have street addresses and long-established homes on them. There are 30 to 40-foot tall trees toward the back of the Oscar Swan property. The tower would be built between those trees and the rear of Oscar Swan. In other words, these homes on these lots that were mentioned in the proposal would back up to a 100-foot structure that was in plain sight, the equivalent height of a 9 or 10-story building, that no matter the disguise, would still be a cell phone tower 70 feet from the property line. To support its claim that a tower at Oscar Swan would not lower property values of adjacent and nearby residences, Verizon would have to supply a study that compares sales of residences as close as 70 feet from towers in other residential neighborhoods. Verizon has not supplied such a study, and therefore, in our opinion, has not made its case that the tower would not lower property values. In fact, most assuredly, such an installation would depreciate the value of properties that are just 70 feet away, and as a result of many more homes throughout our subdivision. When those properties are put on the market, they would go for a discounted price compared to houses a 1/2 mile, 1 mile, or 2 miles away from a tower. And finally, we would like to mention that in addition, This drop in property values would lead to a lower tax assessment for those properties, causing a loss of revenue for the city of Geneva. Thank you very much for your consideration. And now my husband Bruce has a statement, if he could continue.
So this is Bruce Stern, as I mentioned before. And like Sylvia, I live at 362 Colonial Circle. And I also strongly oppose the installation of the Verizon cell tower at the Oscar Swan property. The proposal is in direct opposition to the standard for special use number 5, and that states the proposed building or use will not adversely affect or change the character of the area in which it's located. The proposed tower would extend beyond the top of the trees adjacent to it by 60 to 70 feet. In addition, it would have a flashing light at the top, which would act as a beacon and a marker that one is looking at a cell phone tower and not a tree. The tallest trees in the neighborhood, across the neighborhood, are 30 to 40 feet tall. The houses and businesses that are close to the proposed tower are 1 or 2 stories tall. The tallest building in the entire area is Delnor Hospital, and at its highest point, it's less than 50 feet tall. A 100-foot tall cell tower would be easily visible to all. To make matters worse, we understand the tower would be designed as a fake pine tree, since as several people have mentioned, since most of the surrounding trees are deciduous, when they drop their leaves, there would be a 100-foot tall structure, even more visible and looking totally out of place. A 100-foot blinking Verizon tower would dwarf every other structure or object in the entire area, whether residential trees, residential homes, or businesses, and it would dwarf those other structures and trees and businesses all year long. By the way, many people are unaware that once the tower is built, it can go up to 20 feet higher with no public process due to the passing of Section 6409A of the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012. In plain words, a 100-foot tower can be increased to 120 feet after it's constructed, and the community will have no input. Another point to be noted, there is a preschool nursery school directly adjacent to the proposed site. It serves about 190 children. Not far away is another preschool and nursery school. At this point, a number of parents know the character of the neighborhood because they selected it when they had their children enrolled in that school. They dropped them off, picked them up. They know the neighborhood where their young children go. Having a 100-foot tall cell tower installed directly next door would definitely change the look and the feel of the area. It will likely not be a big selling point for the parents. The tower would have a negative impact on the character and aesthetics of our neighborhood, and this would reduce people's desire to live, work, shop, and attend nursery schools, preschools, and elementary schools that are all in the immediate area. All of this will change our neighborhood's unique residential character. The proposal is inconsistent with the Planning Division's mission statement and is in direct opposition to the standard for special use number 5. We appreciate your listening and your consideration. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Okay, again, for people online, if you wish to speak on this matter, please use the raise hand function on your application so you can be recognized by the commission. Okay, I'll try one more time, just to make sure. Anyone listening online, if you wish to speak on this matter, please use the raised hand function on your application so you can be recognized to speak to the commission. No. Okay, so nobody else online, so we'll resume the in-person testimony. The next person on the list is Michael Ward, 2022 Wellington Court.
Michael Ward, 2022 Wellington Court. First of all, I want to say that I've agreed with everything I've heard tonight from everyone in the audience. And thanks to them, my notes are going to be a lot shorter than I planned because they've covered many of the points. I do want to bring up a couple things, though. And first of all, my background is engineering and business. And for all my working years, technical decisions were data-driven. You didn't just go by the seat of your pants. I was not happy with Verizon's comments, the gentleman online who said that they were not going to provide data. So we have a model, which is what you've been showing on the screen. It's not actual data. It's a computer model of what they think the coverage levels are and what they think the coverage levels will be when they install this tower. Yet, where they point out areas of deficient coverage, everything we hear, including from Verizon, is they have no complaints on coverage. So I think the information is somewhat disingenuous. So I would like to ask the commission to request data, make the data available on the city website so those of us with a technical background can take a look at it. We may agree with it, we may not, but let's not keep it in hiding. The next thing I'd like to mention has to do with the question of this being their primary location. I'd really like to know where they did try. You know, all we know for sure is they tried a site next to Eagle Brook, but we don't know if they've tried up and down the Randall Road corridor. They mentioned, they made the comment, if there are alternative sites, they'd like to hear what they are. I think this room could provide many alternative sites. For my own suggestion, I think the small cell concept is good. It's used frequently in urban environments. They could literally start with the Jewel in Batavia, go up north on the west side of Randall Road, putting in as many cells as they need, go past the fairgrounds, cover Randall Road, cover the commons and the surrounding area. So I think there's a lot of opportunities rather than going into what is really a residential area. So, and I'd like to finally bring up this residential area a little bit more. You know, we're looking at the city code that was written 2012. Oh my gosh, has technology changed? I think it's time for the city to revisit this whole issue of cell towers. I happened to find an article on the internet by Verizon dated April 13th of 2020 titled, "How Far Does 5G Reach?" Their statement was simply, unobstructed range up to 1,500 feet. As we move from 4G LTE to 5G, if they really have a range problem of 1,500 feet or less, do you realize that Geneva is going to look like a pincushion with all of these cell towers? I think it's time for the city, the planning department, the commission, I'm not sure whose responsibility it would be, to come up with a comprehensive plan for siting all the potential locations that these towers could go in. Otherwise, you people are, and we are going to be burdened with one individual application after another. They're trying to get us to eat the elephant one slice at a time. I think it's time we saw the whole elephant. And in conjunction with this request that you come up with a comprehensive plan, I would like to suggest that you work in conjunction with St. Charles and Batavia. Oscar Swan is literally right across the border from St. Charles. I don't really know how much St. Charles folks have been consulted on this, but I think it's time that the three communities really work together. So my request is that you develop a comprehensive plan and that you reject this specific proposal at this time as we wait for a better comprehensive look. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I have, next one on there is Brian Donahue, I believe it is, 522 Bradbury Lane.
Hi, Brian Donahue, that's Donahue, 522 Bradbury Lane. I'm part of the Williamsburg community. Unfortunately, I apologize for my address. I wasn't planning on speaking originally, and two, I'm not as prepared as some other individuals here who have brought up wonderful cases. I will, however, say that I am part of, and no offense, but I'm part of a younger generation. And my wife and I moved here recently, 2 years ago, March 21st of 2020. A wonderful weekend that I'm sure we all remember quite fondly. We were very excited to move to this community. I can, however, say, they bring up a lot of data on these presentations, and they're saying, they show us the map and coverage, but, these aren't really facts. This is hearsay. This is proposed data, in my opinion. This is my opinion. It's just a proposition. It's just showing us like, oh, what it can do for us. But what I can say is, if that tower was there 2 years ago and 4 months, and my wife and I were looking at this community, and we are a demographic that towns want. We are the young, new generation that are buying homes. And if we would have saw that cell tower 2 years ago in 4 months, maybe not me, maybe I would have been, oh, this is a wonderful community, I could have looked past it. But my wife would have said no. I can say this for a fact. It's not just data, it's not hearsay. She would have looked at it and said, ew, gross. And this is facts. I'm sorry, I don't have any more, factual data to present to you. I wish I did, and I wish I came to a little more prepared, but thank you, and I hope you vote in the no. And I wish I could stay for longer, but I do have a sick dog to get home to, so thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, next one is Bill Nelson, 345 Colonial Drive.
I did think that was a sign-in sheet, by the way, so I wasn't planning on speaking, but thank you for having us.
You're speaking now.
Bill Nelson, 345 Colonial Circle. I just had a couple comments. I guess I didn't realize, till the gentleman presented tonight, that we were supposed to go to the actual site to see the balloon test. I thought the point of that was to see it from our property, which I did and many of our neighbors did. And it stuck out like a sore thumb. And this is in the summertime, spring, summertime, full foliage from both backyard, side yard, front of the house, a couple doors down. So I just want you guys to understand that I don't know if any of you were involved and drove around in that, but it did stick out like a sore thumb. Second comment was the gentleman mentioned that there are a whole bunch of dead trees around where that balloon test was. And he mentioned that those are going to be taken down, and some undesirable trees are going to be taken down. To me, that makes it worse. It's going to stick out more than it stuck out on the day when all that was there. And I'm sorry, but putting arborvitae trees around it doesn't help that. Arborvitae trees don't grow to 100 feet. They're not going to block any of that. It's still going to stick out. So just a couple points on that. The other point I had, or question I had, I guess, for the gentleman from Verizon was, you know, when he showed his map and they showed their original desired area to place this tower, and the coverage that would be around that, where this tower is nowhere near that. And when they showed the map with the blue, it didn't fill in any of that area. That was their desired search site. So I guess I don't understand why a business would be pushing to stick this in a residential area when their desired site is west of that residential area in a commercial area. That seems a very easy place to put a tower, other than maybe they didn't want to pay one of those businesses to stick it there. So I guess I'm not really understanding why it got put into our neighborhood versus their desired area to the west. And I hope you guys maybe address that before you vote on this proposal. I guess the last thing I would just say is, and I could be wrong on this, but I thought the mission of what you guys do is, to protect property values and to protect the unique character of the city. And I don't think allowing this tower to go in our neighborhood does either one of those things. So I thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Next person is Paula Merrington, I believe it is, 528 Dempsey Place.
Okay, so I'm not Paula Merrington, but I am married to Paula Merrington, and she is on her way to the hospital, Delano Hospital, with
that's
my daughter
unfortunate.
who
Yes, that's-
fainted in the back. And she's okay, by the way, for everybody.
Oh,
who's
that's good.
concerned.
I saw that happening. I just didn't know what was going, but yeah, I'm glad she's doing okay.
Yeah, totally, thank you. So I will be trying to summarize her statement. I'll also get into my statement maybe first, so that I can piggyback and add on what she would want to add as well. Paula, P-A-U-L-A. My name is Gary, G-A-R-Y. Last name is Van Breda, V-A-N, space, capital B-R-E-D-A. So I'll read my statement first. So, Mr. True, Alderman, Alderpersons, fellow citizens and residents of Geneva, good evening to you all. As I mentioned, my name is Gary Van Breda, and for the last 7 years, I've lived at 528 Dempsey Place, and have called Geneva home. It's lot 38 on the parcel that was presented earlier. Now, before I get into the detail of my statement, I was somewhat disappointed and offended that the Verizon speakers were able to infer and reference safety and health concerns, although it was made pretty clear that the citizens and residents of Geneva was not allowed to make any inference to health and safety under the Code of Federal Regulations. So just wanted to make a point that it seemed somewhat discriminatory to do that.
I'll address that. Health and safety, Verizon was talking about 911 calls, ambulance calls, police calls, being responsive to emergencies. What is prohibited and what they did not talk about were radio frequency health-related issues supposedly emanated from cellular service. Those are the distinctions. If you wish to talk about some issue about public response, ambulance, police, whatever, that is fair game. The health concerns that are prohibited by the Federal Telecommunications Act are radio frequency and in that environment. That's the safety issue. There is no disparate treatment with respect to what we're doing here tonight, sir.
Okay. So I'll continue. So when we moved to the Chicagoland area 7 years ago, Geneva immediately moved onto our radar screen because it was such a quaint town and had unique character that aligned with the way in which we wanted to establish and raise our family. The vision and mission statement of the City of Geneva is clear about the protection of city assets as well as the protection of the unique character of the city. And that really attracted us into the City of Geneva. We loved that there were open spaces, the mature trees in the neighborhood, and the wide roads and sidewalks that was conducive to walking our dogs and riding our bicycles. We love the fact that in minutes we could access restaurants and amenities in the Geneva downtown area, which we support generously. When researching the purchase of our property, the wisdom of our parents rang loud, that the most important consideration when buying property is location, location, location. Like many of my fellow residents of my age, a large part of our wealth is tied in the equity we grew over years of investing in property. And we continue to build and protect that equity as we move closer to retirement and look forward to handing down some of that wealth for the well-being of our children. We felt very comfortable with the investment that we made at our property at 528 Dempsey Place. But I can also let you know that if the cell phone tower was part of the proposal in the area, or if it was constructed at that point in time, I would not have bought that property, and neither would my wife. And I think two gentlemen before me said the word "ew." In my line of work, "ew" is a technical term, so I knew exactly what he was saying. I'd also point out that we felt very comfortable with our investment, even with the knowledge that we were backing up to the Oscar Swan property. In fact, one of our favorite things about our home today is that we often on Saturdays and Sundays get to sit on our back porch and enjoy the music and festivities of the events that are hosted by the Oscar Swan facility. It brings great joy to our family to listen to the music and ceremonies, especially during the summer times. I will add that we often accommodate our guests at Oscar Swan, and we do encourage them to enjoy breakfast and brunch there too. So we are very concerned about this construction and installation of the Verizon cell phone tower. It's almost in our backyard. If you measure where the cell phone tower will be to the beginning of our backyard, that's 200 feet. 3 doors down from us, the residence is 70 feet from the back fence line of his property. So when we bought this property, we assumed that the expectation and we expected that our investment would be protected, especially by the vision of the city. But now we feel that our investment is threatened by this project. My concern is that the cell phone tower will deflate the value of my property. Common sense tells me that potential buyers will not be attracted to or will be willing to buy a premium or willing to pay a premium price for the property, especially with a tower of this type very visible from the backyard of my property. And really, we should be calling this for what it is. It is a fake tree. It doesn't look like a tree. It doesn't resemble anything that looks like any type of evergreen that I've ever seen. And quite frankly, once the deciduous trees drop their leaves, it will be very evident that there's something strange and out of character within the neighborhood. I'm also concerned that the approval of this tower opens the door for the erection of more towers on the property and quite frankly in the greater Geneva area. Previous speaker mentioned that Geneva could easily look like a pincushion of cell phone towers, and that is not conducive to the vision and mission statement of the city of Geneva. So we definitely do not want Geneva's reputation to change from the quaint town along the Fox River Valley to the cell phone tower capital of Chicagoland. I just can't see this as being a constructive strategy to attract residents to the city of Geneva for future growth, and hence my concern about the protection and growth of my Geneva investment. Finally, I'd like you to consider the fact that many residents here today, and those who have submitted written opposition to this project, are also current Verizon customers, and many have vocalized that they are satisfied with their cell phone signal quality, but are not happy with the proximity of the tower to their residential properties. In addition to signing the petition in opposition to the cell phone tower, I will also be submitting the content of the speech into the public record. So thank you very much for listening to our concerns. I'm going to change over to what Paula has written down. Some of the additional concerns that she raised was we've already had in our Dempsey community people who have moved out. They've said we just can't see the value in living here. We don't want to live here, and have moved. And at least one resident has moved in and has made the comment that if they knew about the cell phone tower, the Verizon cell phone tower in their back property, that they would not have purchased that property. I'm going to leave it there and thank you for your time and attention.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we have, I believe it's a husband and wife, Chris and Lucia, 524 Dempsey Place. Chris?
It's my wife, Lucia, but
You're speaking on her
for us.
behalf? Okay.
I'm Chris Pirelli. I live at 524 Dempsey Place in Geneva. And I get it, 5G. They don't send out the signal like the 4G. They need more towers. But in the middle of a community, I'd like to see some kind of statistics in this area in Illinois, where it's in the middle of somebody's backyards. I'd like to see some real pictures of a tree. There's owls that live back there. Are they going to live in that tree? My concern is also, if this proposal goes through for this tower, does this include the 3 future equipment areas for future towers? I guess I can't get an answer now, but it sure looks like it, so that could mean 4 towers. They're showing 3 additional future equipment areas. Yeah, I just think if it was your backyards, you wouldn't want it there. That's all I got.
All right. Thank you, sir. Next person is Tom Johnson, I believe, 365 Colonial Circle.
Thank you. My name is Tom Johnson. I've lived in the city of Geneva now for 4.5 years. I actually have owned 2 properties in Williamsburg. September of 2019, we moved to 2009 Sheffield Lane, and roughly, I want to say 370 days ago, we moved to 365 Colonial Circle. So if I had known there was going to be a cell phone tower 500 feet directly northeast of my view, I probably wouldn't have bought the home. And I know that Verizon is a very big data-driven company. I've been a customer for 15 years, been happy with their service. I also conduct business in my basement and have no problem with dropped calls. I do have one question for the Verizon team that we should consider. Have we seen a success plan to build a site in the Commons where a lot of this traffic is coming from? They have not shown that yet. This is now the second location they're looking for, so I would like to see other sites that they can build, not near residential properties, as most of the group is concerned about. So I'm against it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Greg Holly, 367 Colonial Circle.
Yep. So I'm Greg Holly. I live at 367 Colonial Circle. I'm actually Tom's neighbor. I've been a resident at Geneva, since 2005 in the same house. I will say when I first came in here, into this town, I grew up in Elk Grove in the Chicago area. I lived in Texas for 15 years, and I moved back here, and my family had migrated out to the Fox River Valley. So we looked around when I moved back here. St. Charles or Geneva made sense. We were right in the middle of both of our families. I'm a very, very anal person. I'm looking for quality of life. When I moved back here, I cruised every street, looked for every, I didn't want to live near a main road. I wanted to live in a cul-de-sac area. I wanted a front porch, all these things. I could afford, I'm a professional. I have an engineering background. I work for a technology company that's as large as Verizon. And I will say that when I moved up here, I looked at Eagle Brook, and I looked at several houses in Eagle Brook, and everywhere I looked at Eagle Brook, I saw that tower, whether it was in the backyard, whether it was down the street. When I walked out of that driveway, I saw that tower, and that's the only reason I didn't move to Eagle Brook. Rather, I chose to live at Colonial Circle. I bought a house that was owned by a widowed, or a divorcee, I guess. And I dropped a ton of money into that house, not just to drive up the value, but because I wanted to live in it. I gutted it. I put wood floors in. I put a new kitchen in, a new master bath. I just put in a new, back patio, a gazebo. I redid the front porch. I've redone everything in that house. I touched every surface of that house. To me, it's quality of life. Geneva is about quality of life. It's the character of that neighborhood. It's the character of Geneva. Driving down State Street, coming into the town of Geneva from the west, you're going to see this fake tree that you see in North Carolina. These same damn towers that supposedly look like trees, but they don't. They do not look like trees. They're ugly. They stand out. And as everybody has pointed out, when the leaves drop 6 months out of the year, you're going to be staring at this ugly tree. I also mentioned that, I'm very curious on Verizon. They can't provide data, on, where their cell phone coverage is dropping. They show charts of green, but there's degradation layers on a Smith chart and lobes. I'd be very interested in what those lobes look like. I'd be very interested with that degradation. When we asked the question on, are they losing customers, the answer was no. It just doesn't meet their standards of service. What is that, 5 bars to 1 bar? They talked about capacity. This is a landlocked community. There's no more growth unless you're going to make State Street a 4-lane highway. What extra capacity are we talking about? And then you talk about, at the Geneva Commons, everybody on their cell phones. I'm at the Geneva Commons all the time, probably at Binny's most of the time. But I don't see anybody on their cell phones. People are shopping. They're doing their business, and they're getting out of there. And then the last thing I'll talk about is, cell phone signal as far as my resident. I work out of my house. Thanks to COVID, I don't have to travel anymore, so I work out of my house. And, the reality is if you have a smartphone, an Apple or Android, your home coverage, if you're working off your cell phone, works off of Wi-Fi. You're not working off a cell phone. I have AT&T. I'm not a Verizon customer, but I get 1 bar of AT&T, and I have no problems whatsoever working off of Wi-Fi. So as far as giving additional coverage to residents, I don't think that's factual. As far as they're losing customers, I'd like to see the data on that. I'd like to see the capacity data. And then the other thing I would like to see is data on, you talk about safety, and you talk about, where have you not been able to get a 911 call? Where, has that been a complaint from the fire department? Has it been a complaint from Delnor? Where's the complaints coming from? Where's that data? Or is that just a Verizon fear factor that, hey, that's what's going to happen here if you don't have cell phone coverage? So that's all I have to say. I just want to thank you guys for your time, and I hope you guys will do the right thing and turn this down. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Ben Evans, who is our cityscape consultant, would like to say a couple things before he has to leave.
Oh, right now? Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a break because our consultant on this issue wants to speak, so just hang on a second.
All right, so the commission now recognizes Ben Evans of Cityscape. So Ben, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Ben Evans. I'm with Cityscape. Cityscape is the the city's consultant in matters involving applications that go to the town, to the city for new cell towers. And I have a few points to make in response to some of the folks that have raised certain things. And I'm just here to answer them, and then I have to leave the meeting. So, one or two folks have raised a concern that the tower would have a light on top. As far as I know, that would not be the case. The tower would not be high enough to require aviation lighting. And so I don't think that's a concern. We would recommend that the city add a condition on the permit if they approve the tower, that this tower will not be lighted. The next point is with regards to monopoles, and people say that and with justification, I think that they don't look like real trees or real pine trees. But they can be densified, with more branches per linear foot in order to make it look more like a real pine tree. Grant you, it's not going to be perfect, but I think that it comes pretty close. But and I do think that some pictures of actual monopines should be provided to the city, so they can decide for themselves. Next point is there were a couple of folks that questioned the height of the crane that was used for the balloon test. Well, my reaction is that would be they claim it's substantially under 100 feet. But my reaction is that's a hard mistake to make. But nevertheless, I do think that needs to be answered. We need to find the person or people involved that can answer that question definitively. And the last point I want to make is one gentleman brought up something called Section 6409, which is part of a federal law which allows future modifications of wireless towers that would increase the tower up to another 20 feet. So if in other words, if the tower is initially built to 100 feet, federal law would allow it for the applicant to, or Verizon in this case, sometime down the road, add more feet in order to accommodate more equipment, or another provider who wishes to co-locate to add another 20 feet. Well, this can be to prevent that. It's a stipulation to run with the lease. Stipulation is not the exact real estate word. I can't think of what it is just now, but it can be handled with a permit condition that this tower would never be increased, ever. Whoever owns the land now or in the future. So that's my input. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, resume public comment. Next person on the list is Janine McGowan, 227 Cambridge Drive.
Good evening. I just wanted to make about 4 different points. Firstly, I believe there's a correction that's needed on page 2 of the agenda for this evening. I believe it's the second to last paragraph, where it states that the balloon test took place and it ended at 11 a.m. That is incorrect. I was there at 10:48 with my adult daughter, and that is when the balloon was taken down. Okay. Well, for whatever reason, the balloon test did not go through the stated time on the agenda, so I think that that is an inaccuracy that needs to be corrected. And I immediately texted my alderman, Amy Mayer, to let her know. So I have a text going to her at 10:50 a.m., letting her know that the balloon was gone. So she knows that. And then furthermore, she sent me photos that she took showing the red balloon in place. And so that's proof that obviously she was there to see the test. And I was told by a neighbor that Alderman Gabe Caven went to observe the red balloon as well. So I just wanted to make it clear. Obviously, those aldermen can also speak to that in the future, but they for sure were both there to see the balloon test. And I was there to see that the balloon was not in place when it should have been. So I would propose that that correction be made going forward. Okay, my second point. I believe that the value of the Oscar Swan business would be negatively affected, along with any future property uses, such as, a hotel, if they were to sell the business, a hotel, the event space. Those things are in short supply in Geneva, and having the cell tower there, I think, is a major deterrent to anyone who's looking for a potential wedding site, special event site. The Oscar Swan is very beautiful. It's a highly unique, picturesque, it's like a gem. It's like a hidden gem almost in Geneva. It's so unique to our town. And I think that the Oscar Swan is something for the town, for Geneva to be very proud of. But if someone were to be looking around for a potential wedding site, the first thing they're going to see is that cell tower, and that's going to be a hard no. And we're going to lose that event to, say, Heritage Prairie Farm in St. Charles, or any number of wedding sites that are outside of Geneva. So now we're drawing business out of our town, and that's something that I feel should be avoided. The same with someone looking for a place to stay. If they're looking to book a few rooms for, however many days, and they find out that a cell tower is right outside their window, or they see that it's there, that is going to deter people from booking rooms at the Oscar Swan. So I think that's something that the PCC should hopefully consider. And as what was mentioned earlier this evening, should the Oscar Swan property go on the market, I definitely think that having a huge cell tower there will lower the value of whatever that property can sell for. Okay, so my next point. So having lived in Geneva for nearly 17 years, I've come to know how discerning the residents of Eaglebrook subdivision are in regard to safety as well as reliable cell coverage. Yet those residents in Eaglebrook overwhelmingly opposed the proposed Verizon cell tower at the Bent Tree site just over a year ago in June 2021. The Blackberry subdivision and surrounding residents are no different. So I ask that the Planning and Zoning Commission recognize the many similarities between this proposed site that is so close to a residential neighborhood that's even, it has so many more residents. It has such even higher density. That's what I was looking for. It has much higher density than even Eagle Brook. And I'd ask that the Planning and Zoning Commission remain consistent when you all deliberate and make your recommendation to the City Council. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, I have, I believe it's Lori Bauer, I want to say, 610 Highbury Lane. Oh, okay. I'm sorry to hear that. Sure, if we've got someone there that's got a hand up, we might as well take advantage of that. Thank you for the heads up. So we're going to listen to someone that wants to testify online.
Emily McCafferty, the Planning and Zoning Commission now calls upon you. Please unmute yourself and proceed with your testimony. Why is this happening?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. All right, my name is Emily McCafferty. I live at 2089 Eldorado Drive, so completely opposite side of Geneva. My daughter attends the adjacent preschool to this suggested site, and I'm strongly opposed to this location. Not only because of this, but also because these large cell towers, they don't belong near neighborhoods. They belong in strictly commercial areas. But back to my point about my daughter's preschool. If this goes through, if this gets built there, we will likely need to pull our daughter from that school. And I know that many of the other parents at that school would feel the same way. Unfortunately, we were not notified of this. I just kind of happened to randomly find out. So I do feel that the parents of that school should be notified of this as well, because I'm sure that they would be filling this room with comments as well. So just back to that point, not only will this have a negative impact on the surrounding residential areas, but also the businesses will be impacted, including that school. And that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And since we're online right now, we'll see if there's anyone else that wishes to speak. Please use the hand raised speaker or hand raised function on the application so you can be recognized. Nope, no one? Okay, so we'll resume in here at City Hall. So the next person I have on the list is David Carey, I believe it is, 353 Colonial Circle.
Yes, I am David Carey, 353 Colonial Circle. I guess first off, Oscar Swan Wireless Communication Facility. I'm the unlucky jerk.
Sir, please address to me.
I'm the unlucky jerk who lives about 70 feet from this tower, the proposed tower. I also butt right up against Oscar Swan. I've had to call the police department several times regarding Oscar Swan because they don't take care of their property. And I don't expect they're going to be taking care of the property around this cell tower any better than they currently are taking care of their own property. I called them several years ago after a tree fell onto their fence, actually. And it was a friendly phone call. I just called to let them know that a tree from their property had fallen on their fence. She got very defensive, says, act of God, nothing I can do about it. So that's the response that I get from Oscar Swan. I have to call them a few times. Currently, my biggest problem with them is they have built about a 10-yard wide berm of dead branches between their property and the apartment complex behind them. Dead branches, between here and here, I don't know, that's maybe not quite 10 yards, but it's at least this wide and probably 50 feet long. harbors a lot of coyotes. If you're a fan of coyotes, that's good. I hear them mating in there all the time. But honestly, if that catches fire, the apartment complex, my house, good luck. I've got a few things that I just wrote down here. We keep hearing about Geneva Commons and that it's needed for Geneva Commons. If it really is needed for Geneva Commons, why aren't they raising their hand and cooperating with Verizon? I've heard Geneva Commons has gone into foreclosure several times in the last 10 years. Why wouldn't they be accepting your cash? I mean, you guys are throwing money at them. I don't understand that. So it leads me to the question of, does Geneva Commons think that the look of this tower is going to be so bad that it's going to distract customers and send them away from their facility? I don't know, just speculation on my part. I got a lot of open-ended questions, and if the respondents want to, file something later, that's with you guys. Just a couple of other questions is, hey, why wouldn't you put this by the railroad tracks on the overpass at Peck Road? It's higher than Oscar Swan. It's on the west side further than Randall Road, in the direction you guys say that you want to go. So I don't get that. It's already an industrial area. You got trains running there every day. I don't know why the cell tower would not be an issue there. Another thing that I would like to mention is residential versus business zoning. I don't really know all the differences, but I can tell you this. If Verizon wanted to put their tower on 3rd Street, I think we'd be hearing a different reaction here. Part of Geneva's local charm is some of the things that you don't see in other communities. One of the things that I left before I moved to Geneva in 2005 was power lines. It's actually one of the reasons I left. I didn't like the distraction of these big power poles and the lines going across and the lines dropping and the buzzing sound. Nobody's mentioned that buzzing sound about the towers, but I sure have read about it. Don't know if it exists or not. But anyway, cell phone towers, the new power lines for Geneva. Do we really want them? The gentleman, I think, from Verizon mentioned this is a $750,000 project.
Sir, you need to address me,
I'm sorry,
please.
so very sorry. I think he mentioned that this is a $750,000 project. And this isn't a one-off. They're going to be building thousands of these across the nation. And yet, what we get, I think it's some kind of prank, honestly. A balloon test for 4 hours, and the balloon pops. I think that's hilarious. A $750,000 project in this one location, that this I don't know, I won't say billion, but probably dollar company, but they can't afford a balloon that won't pop for more than 4 hours? It doesn't seem to me like they're giving us a whole lot of consideration. Yeah. I guess I'd like to leave you with a couple of comments. This is a quote from Jesse earlier on. It's a home run for us. I didn't hear any of our residents saying anything about it being a home run for us. We also heard the representative from Cityscape state, I'm just following the code. Minimum wage, I don't know what that is currently, but if everybody just followed the code of minimum wage, we'd all be making about $10 an hour. And when you just follow the code, that tends to be what you get is the minimum. I believe it was the person that was contracted by Geneva had mentioned, yeah, these disguised towers with pine trees, they can be added with more branches to make them look better. They can be done this and they can be done that. But when their answer is, we're just following the code and not doing anything more that might help us, I don't expect they're going to be adding anything to this tower that's going to make it look better. And there's a big assumption that I think that's being made here, and that's that the location at Oscar Swan, it's sure zoned as not residential, but its feel is residential. It's a lot more residential than maybe the parking lot at Geneva Commons, maybe the new apartments in the project where St. Charles Mall used to be. Industrial areas that already have things that look industrial like them, rather than a grove of trees that I chose to live behind because I was attracted to the area. Get a lot of people come to my house and say, what a wonderful place. I never knew Geneva had a little place like this. Well, maybe not for long. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Next person is Fran Feta, I believe it is, 2019 Wellington Court.
Hello, my name is Fran Fata, 2019 Wellington Court. Thank you to Mr. Schinkel for the PowerPoint and taking us through those things, and thank you to you for being here still and listening to all of this. Grateful to hear and listen and learn about this. When we were walking in the park at Williamsburg, our three boys asked, "Oh, Mom, look at that balloon," you know. I said, "Yeah." That's, I guess I felt defeated. I didn't know there was going to be a meeting for this. I thought this was already a done deal. And when I heard about this meeting, I said, oh, I'm going to make it. Never been to a meeting before, and thinking I may want to be up there one day. But I guess there was something Mr. Schinkel said, and his voice trailed off right at the end, or I didn't hear it, something like, we have a need to provide blank, and I missed that. So I was curious what that was. I'm an orchestra teacher. I volunteer, soccer coach, basketball. Love doing that stuff. Geneva is a gem. We came from Park Ridge, moved here in 2013. I actually grew up playing soccer out here, even though I lived in Park Ridge, because the teams out here were just a little bit better. So my dad would drive me out here and bike, and I fell in love with this area. I'm thinking, what can I do? I can only control myself and my family. Talked with my husband. If this deal goes through, I'm like, oh, do we move to another area of Geneva, or do we just punt? So I would say if this deal goes through, it would be, we talked about strongly considering leaving Geneva, even though it is a gem. I don't want that in our area. I don't want that in our neighborhood. Put it somewhere. I don't know how money works, and I know that's driving this deal with Oscar Swan, but can they put it somewhere where maybe it's more expensive, but somewhere not right near our homes? I liked what the gentleman said about quality of life. That was why we moved here as well. We try really hard to have good life balance, good quality of life, and that eyesore will be around for, it would be hard to get used to for at least several generations, and I can't go into the health stuff. That was what I was prepared to talk about, so unfortunately I can't talk about health stuff, but I would consider strongly moving with my family. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Okay, we're going to go online. Someone has their hand raised, so we're going to bring them in.
The commission now calls upon Kevin McCafferty. Kevin, please unmute yourself and proceed with your testimony. I believe you're self-muted.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Kevin McCafferty. I live at 2089 El Dorado Drive in Geneva, which is the Eagle Brook subdivision. With regards to the Eagle Brook hearing, there are a couple things that I wanted to note was that the Eagle Brook tower that was proposed was on Randall and Glen Eagle, and I noticed on the applicants it shows that there's a proposal for a tower on Randall and Glen Eagle currently. So I know that when there was a hearing last, the planning and zoning had voted against recommendation to City Hall, but the City Hall never got a chance to establish precedent and vote on it because the applicant at that time had withdrew his application. So what that means to me is that this Oscar Swan determination is going to be very important for, not just the people around the Oscar Swan, but also for us here in Eagle Brook. And I'm pretty certain that most of the people in my area aren't even aware that the determination wasn't actually finalized or considered, be able to be considered a legal precedent. So given that the application had been withdrawn previously in July or August of 2021, and now it shows that there's another one on their proposal, so it tells me that if they can get precedence here for Oscar Swan, well, then they're likely to get, the city won't be able to turn down, anything else going forward from there. And the one in Eagle Brook will go in, and then among, towers anywhere else that they want to put them. I'm sorry, 1 second. There are just a couple of points that I want to make. One being that there's 3 meeting minutes that can be found on the City of Geneva website. I would hope that all of the considerations that were brought up from the public, which was pretty significant. There was 220. There was a 220 person signed petition from residents. There was massive amounts of public comments, including emailed submissions, affidavits from realtors, and those meeting minutes can be found on the City of Geneva Planning and Zoning sites for dates 5/27/21, 6/10/21, 7/8/21. Just as a reference for anybody that's interested there. Previously, the application did not meet the special use standards in many areas, and I see here that they tried to shore up on some of their, on some of these deficiencies that they had, but I'm not sure that they've done all that good of a job. For example, with the special use number 2, the proposed building or use will not diminish the value of adjacent and nearby properties. And what the argument was previously was that there's no credible evidence showing that it has a negative impact. So it looks like it appears now that there's been they attached a study. Looks like it looks like a internally produced study, and then it says here there on the actual response page that it says that there's no evidence to suggest the presence of the communications facilities would have a negative impact on property nearby. And then it says it's to the contrary, with over half of all wireless Swan subscribers no longer owning a landline, the robust wireless coverage is a necessity for homeowners and businesses alike and a key factor of choosing a place to live or establish a new business. They should have to substantiate that more so further than what's been provided, in my opinion. Their argument there is extremely weak, and there's credible evidence, and I've heard a number of comments tonight. People had referenced, realtors and nobody wants to live near a cell tower. That's pretty much a fact. And then there was a comment that the presenter made that the tree line would be 60 feet. So I believe that's pretty deceptive because a 60-foot tree would represent like the local parkway trees at maximum, very maximum maturity age, which takes decades and decades and decades to achieve that height. So that's not really that's not a very accurate depiction of what the tree line actually would be. We felt that the tree line on Bentry Drive was between 30 and 40 feet, no more than 40. So a 100-foot tower, especially during the winter, is going to be a focal point. And I think that's all that I had to say. But just to hopefully, I hope that the city will take into consideration the Eagle Brook, all of the comments and information and all the information from the Eagle Brook hearing and take it into consideration for currently with this Oscar Swan, as well as I believe that this is going to be a landmark decision where the precedent will be established, and then the city won't be able to turn down any towers from there on. The Eagle Brook Tower will inevitably come into place. There will be many, many unexpected, unhappy residences that will react with their votes. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, there's no one else online right now currently, so we'll go back to City Hall. I've got Gary and Grace Van Breda. Excuse me? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, okay. So then, okay. And then I got William Cole, 2280 Bloomfield Circle.
Good evening. My name is William Kale, like the vegetable.
Sorry.
I reside at 2280 Bloomfield Circle in Geneva. My comment is just short. This is obviously a commercial residential project going very close to or it's a commercial or industrial project going into a residential neighborhood, and the residents don't want it. I'm here to support them with this perception. Hopefully that we can move on with that. We're kind of stuck here. It has other places. It could be down the block, across the street. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And then I have David and Bridget Stigmeyer, Mueller, 532 Dempsey Place. Yes.
Bridget Sillig-Mueller, 532 Dempsey. I'm that new homeowner that I think a couple people have talked about. We just moved here in June, and I just want to make a statement that I would have 100% not have purchased this home if I knew that there was a cell phone tower going in my backyard. I am lot 36, so my next door neighbor is the one that it will be directly behind. And not that this matters, but my daughter is a huge lover of birds, and we picked this property specifically because we loved the trees, we loved everything about it, and I'm not a scientist, I can't speak to any of that, but I could see that could disturb the wildlife that we love so much, and I'm just regretting my decision purchasing this home 100%. So if this goes in my backyard, I don't know how long we'll stay, but unfortunately, I don't think we'll get the value for our property that we just purchased, just in June. So I know a lot of people say that there's not enough data for that, but I think it also goes on feel. And I know that as a purchaser myself, if I was to see that in the backyard of our beautiful home, it was completely renovated, all the things that we liked, That one thing would have completely deterred me. And I think it's a shame that we're even considering this. I think that I can't speak to what exactly is going on between the contractual agreements between Oscar Swan and Verizon, but I do think that this is an easy sell because you have someone that is elderly, owning a business that probably has lost a lot of revenue during COVID, clearly because her business relied heavily on people coming to a facility that we were all avoiding for 2 years. And I'm assuming she would have received some sort of money having this on her property. And like a gentleman said before, that also has a property that backs up onto it, where I think the only line of fence that doesn't have damage. And I'm sitting here going like this, hoping that our piece of our fence won't fall down too. It's just a shame. I think that yes, zoning wise, it is a business structure, so sure, a cell phone tower could meet all of those requirements, but it is 100% a residential community. And I don't understand why, if we are talking, when we see all those maps, that we want to support the Randall Road sector and the Geneva Commons, not all of those individuals that go to those places are residents. So it should be in a common space, this tower, that should support the visitors of this space and the residents. But unfortunately, what this tower will do will negatively impact just the residents, our property values, our quality of life, and we actually just moved from Pepper Valley. We were on the corner of Pepper Valley and Cambridge. We, again, didn't know the area and decided to purchase a home that had Delnor Hospital right behind it. I work at Rush Copley. I'm used to ambulance noises, but it was horrible. And so we decided to move, but wanted to stay in Geneva, wanted to keep our daughter in the Williamsburg school, had this opportunity, but it is devastating to know. And I never thought I'd come to an event like this. I don't like public speaking, none of this, but I've lost sleep at night thinking that we've sank a lot of money into a property that is worth a fraction of what it should be. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that includes everyone that is on the list that was presented to me at the beginning of the meeting. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak on this matter who has not done so already? Yes, ma'am?
I spoke, but could I add another comment real quick? Or not?
No. Anyone else? Yeah, I will do that. Okay, so we're going to check online and see if there's anyone available. So again, if you're online and you wish to speak, please use the raised hand function on your application so you can be recognized to address the commission. All right, one more time, and then we're closing it. Anyone online who wishes to speak on this matter, please use the raise hand function on your application, and you will be recognized to address the commission. Nope. Okay, so that is everyone wishing to speak publicly on the matter. We will hear from the applicant.
Thank you. So I did make notes. If I missed anything, please, commissioners, feel free to ask me.
We made notes as well.
To elaborate, okay. First of all, it keeps being referred to as residential. It is a business zone. It is B1 zone. We are meeting the requirements. I think that's important to note. Having it next to residential, that is not unusual. That is something that's actually very common. You have sites in Geneva that with a water tank with multiple antennas, the same exact antennas that are being proposed in this facility, right in and across from residential. You have a tower that's on the Geneva, or two towers, I believe, that are on the Geneva Public Works Yard that are right across from residential. Verizon and all the carriers, they lease from hundreds
of churches, schools, hospitals. Hospitals not only soliciting the business to get the antennas on the roof, but adding antennas on every floor to make sure there's seamless coverage. These sites exist all around us. They are in residential. It is unavoidable. The balloon test, we are meeting the city code requirement that is spelled out in your ordinance. And we had to use a crane and tie up a specific balloon at that height. I agree with Cityscape. That's a pretty hard statement to say that we would get up and lie about the height of the crane. We dropped a tape, and I took pictures and sent it to Chayton. We met the requirement. The wind picks up as you get during out to the day, and 12 minutes before 11, the balloon popped. But the crane did not come down. We met the requirement. Regarding leasing, we negotiate, and Verizon offers very fair or above average rents. They pursue sites that meet their requirement. They're not going to walk away from a site just to save money. It's very specific on city code requirements on meeting those sites. They become very valuable. They're very hard to find. So when we approach different landlords and we can't come to terms, it is not because Verizon's cheap. They are offering average to above average market rates. And when we evaluate the site, and as we talked through earlier, meeting code requirements, it made a lot more sense to put this monopine design in a cluster of trees in a business zone than to put it in an open parking lot that would look like a Christmas tree in a parking lot. But we can't force landlords to lease to us. They have a variety of reasons why they want to consider the proposal and a variety of reasons why they turn it down. We can't force them to do it. Eagle Brook was referenced. That is a completely different site in a completely different area. It has nothing to do with this location. The RF need. We have a detailed RF affidavit. I think it's 4 or 5 pages long, detailing the need. We had testimony tonight from our RF engineer explaining why the site is needed. Believe me when I tell you, Verizon is thrilled that the existing Verizon customers have seamless coverage and they're happy with their coverage. They would not be building this site if they didn't think it was needed. I can promise you that. Regarding property values, I see a lot of references to property values, but again, it is all speculation. I have yet to see.
Sir, please.
I've yet to see any appraisal reports directly tied to a property value coming down because of a cell tower. There are cell towers in Geneva. There are cell antennas in Geneva and residential. I have yet to see any of those properties that have gone down directly attributable to those facilities. So we have submitted our report and we feel this is a solid site. There's questions on the carriers. Commissioner, you had referenced earlier, we were talking about it. I did find it in the code. It's section 10(3) number 3. It reads, all towers regulated under this section shall be constructed structurally to accommodate no fewer than 4 antenna array of equal loading capacity. So that is why it is important to be at that 100 feet, not only for Verizon's coverage, but you're actually now being able to promise those carriers, those 3 additional carriers there. And to answer that one gentleman's question, you can see in the site plan, there is only one facility with the vertical real estate. That'll be the monopine. But all the carriers have related ground equipment, and that is factored into the design. So all those carriers, that will expand if and ever they come to co-locate on this facility, and they would have to go through permitting just like any other carrier. There will be no light on this tower. So you can add that as a requirement. We're fine with it. It's not required. A noise study was submitted. Chayton knows it meets those requirements. There will be no noise, or it meets the zoning requirement. No application. So I think I covered everything, but if I don't, please let me know. But I just want to reiterate, this is not only, the application is very thorough, and we have checked all the boxes. If we can't go here, I don't know where we could go. This is a very unique site that happens to fall right in line with your zoning requirements regarding new antenna facilities. Your third-party consultant you paid for agrees 100%. So I hope you consider that tonight when you make your vote. And we are here to answer any other questions that you have.
All right. Yes, John.
I have a question. Assuming Verizon or an affiliate will be leasing the ground for a number of years from the Swan.
Oh, John, Mike again. I know. Always forget.
I'm assuming that Verizon or an affiliate will be leasing the ground from the Oscar Swan location and be the primary tenant on the lease. As and when other providers join you on the tower or join them on the tower, will they become co-tenants or will it always be a Verizon lease? And where I'm going with this is, somebody mentioned obsolescence. If technology progresses and this tower becomes obsolete and all of the up to four providers stop using the tower, is there a provision in the lease that requires the tower to be removed and the ground to be turned to greenfield?
It's a very good question. So you have to remember you have two components here. You have Verizon Wireless.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot even propose this tower without Verizon as the anchor tenant.
Right.
They are the one providing the coverage. They're the one with the need. Verizon is not in the tower business, so they have teamed up with certain tower companies, national tower companies. The company in this case is called Tower North.
Right.
So Tower North is leasing to Verizon.
Right.
And they have secured enough lease space and they solicit market to the other carriers that would come co-locate, AT&T.
As subtenants,
As
probably.
subtenants, they would be co-locations on that.
Okay.
Now, what you can do, I would imagine, Chayton, maybe you can elaborate on this. If Verizon were to terminate or find the site not needed, if Verizon's on the tower, this tower is not compliant. And you could make this tower come down. I mean, you have to have a wireless tenant in order to make this site viable and meet the zoning requirement. So as long as there's as long as a wireless carrier operating on this tower, whether it's Verizon and then AT&T, and let's say Verizon decommissions the site and AT&T is on it, it is still viable. It is still meeting the zoning requirement. But if there are no tenants on there, I would think you could make them take that down.
Well, and that's fine, but you say make them take that down. What's the credit behind who's going to take that down? Oscar Swan,
No, Tower North.
Tower North.
It would, yeah, they would be required to take it down. Part of the zoning.
And I don't know the credit of Tower North, and I think they're affiliated with Centerline, but.
Yes, they're the same thing, yeah.
Is there any kind of security that goes into that? So if they ever had to take it down, you get, whether it's a letter of credit or a bond or some sort, to secure that obligation, because I don't know what the credit of those entities are.
I think you'd have to work with your building permit department on that, a surety bond, but adding a surety bond for the life of the agreement, I believe this is,
Would be very costly.
that'd be very costly, and I don't know if that's fair. I think you'd have to review
just
other
curious.
codes. I think if you could put that component in there, but I don't think a surety bond for the life of the agreement is very fair.
Right.
And I think they would probably want to see
So
other
John,
codes.
I think if it were on a water tower, for instance, or a
Right.
property the city owned, that is exactly what would occur. Given that this is on private property,
Right.
that would probably be something between the
Right.
landlord and the tenant.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Whether there's something in that lease or not.
Right.
I don't know that we even see it.
Right.
No, that's proprietary.
Probably
but
not.
You could make it part of the zoning approval. no?
There's a provision in the zoning ordinance that talks about removal of the tower if it stops being used as a wireless communication facility. And it has to be down within 180 days.
If it's not down, the city can self-help and take it down, or?
There's provisions in here. The city may extend the time removal of the site.
I'm sure your city attorney could figure out a way to
Yeah.
get that removed.
So,
Yeah, but that's helpful. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, I was just
Yeah.
curious, someone in the audience had mentioned obsolescence. The second thing I had was, I'd like Mr. Lane to maybe speak, if he could, about value implications of homes much closer, because I do respect the points brought up about homes that are half a mile away are very differently affected than homes that are hundreds of feet away. And I'm assuming also, someone also wanted to know if you're an MIA certified, I'm assuming you're a licensed appraiser.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Yeah, there were a couple questions about my credentials. I am a state certified general real estate appraiser. I've actually been an appraiser longer than I've been doing work for the wireless industry since 1986. And going along with my credentials, so we're allowed to wear different hats in the real estate business. So when I'm working in the wireless industry and doing site selection and site acquisition, I can act as an advocate for a client. But when I'm wearing my appraisal hat, I cannot. I have to be impartial and objective, and I'm not allowed to perform any valuation services with bias or with preference. So I just wanted to make that clear. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to identify or isolate any possible impact that a tower might have on the values of the surrounding properties. It's a difficult task when you start getting too close to the tower because you're limiting the pool of data that you're looking at, and the data essentially becomes irrelevant. So we settled on a quarter-mile radius and then a half-mile radius just because I was trying to pick up sufficient data, sufficient numbers of sales transactions to make the statistical analysis somewhat meaningful.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Sure. So just because you say a quarter of a mile, the sales aren't at a quarter of a mile. They could be a sale 50 feet from a tower, but they're up to a quarter of a mile. They're within that radius.
Correct.
So
right.
some of the sales you reference, maybe they're within that distance you reference.
Correct. Right. And Geneva's a little bit unique because there are no existing towers in residential neighborhoods in the town. Most of them are on the perimeter. They're located in commercial and industrial areas. And so in order to try to isolate some sort of potential negative impact on residential values, I had to look for spots where there were homes proximate to a tower. And there were some areas that part of that radius encompassed farmland or undeveloped land, but eventually it did hit some sort of some residential properties. I've done. So I started appraising when I was in 1986. I've been doing work in the wireless for the wireless industry since 1999, and I've done a number of these sorts of studies, and I've reviewed a number of these studies, and I've never, in the 22 years I've been doing this work, found any empirical evidence suggesting that there's an impact, positive or negative, to property values based on proximity to cell towers. I found, we call that external obsolescence.
Right.
I have found situations where external obsolescence exists due to other sources, other causes. I actually did a very detailed study in a neighborhood in Wilmette, the North Shore, where the tower is located right in the middle of a residential neighborhood, and I was able to get a little bit more granular in the analysis, and it returned the same sort of results that you see in this report. There's no measurable impact associated with the tower to residential property values.
So are you saying you're hearing a lot of people say, I wouldn't buy or own or shop for a house near a cell tower, and there's other things that people wouldn't buy or own or sell or want to own nearby. So are you saying that while the demand pool or the willing buyer pool might be smaller, ultimately it may take longer to sell, but you're saying that the price that it ultimately sells for is not materially affected?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Michael?
Can I just ask, excuse me, one question of you still?
Yes.
We brought up earlier some of the towers in Geneva, like at Public Works, which has a lot of residential around it, is in fairly close proximity. Is there a reason that wasn't one that you looked at?
Yeah, there was. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. The towers in the Public Works, actually in that strip of land by the railroad tracks, there's 2 towers at Public Works, and then there's another tower a bit to the west. When I looked at that data, what? No.
No, he's asking why you didn't use it in the study.
Why didn't put it in the study?
Why
It
those
wasn't part of
weren't-
his analysis.
weren't part of
Right.
the analysis?
The issue was, this came up, the name of the subdivision, Glen
Eaglebrook.
Glen Eagles.
Eaglebrook.
So Glen Eagles subdivision is just adjacent south of those towers. And when you started to expand the radius of the search area, it started to pick up bigger and bigger chunks of Glen Eagle, and those are higher.
Eaglebrook.
Eaglebrook.
Sorry, I'm sorry. It started to pick up bigger chunks of the subdivision, and the home prices in the subdivision are at the high end, and so it started to impact the data in a way that didn't seem like it was giving us like a good statistical picture of what was going on there. So I didn't include that in the study, but. This afternoon, actually, right before the meeting, after having read some of the public comments, I did a similar search around the water tank. I believe it's Long Avenue near the high school, and same kind of search I did, data search I did for the other 4 locations, and that area bore out the same evidence that was in my report. The properties closest to the water tank actually were more, the per square foot values were higher, closer to the water tank, the antennas on the water tank. And then as I expanded out, the values actually got lower as we went out and increased the diameter, the radius of the search area. So it like I said, all the studies I've done so far bear out the fact that there does not seem to be a correlation between the presence of a tower and residential property values.
Thank you.
Mim?
I have another question for Mr. Lane.
Before he leaves.
Sure, sorry.
You're on.
You're on.
Good.
I can't tell. Were any of the comparable sales that you looked at towers that look like this, as opposed to ones that look like some of the other ones you mentioned, which aren't of the same style?
Right, well, so what we were trying to do is make it relevant to this area, to Geneva. So there are no, that I'm aware of, there are no monopine type tree tower, disguised tree towers in this immediate area. I know of a few of them in some different communities, but yeah, Elmhurst. There's. Yeah, I'm familiar with the one in Elmhurst, and it's in a cemetery which is adjacent to a golf course, and there's not a lot of residential properties surrounded, so that might be that would be a tricky one to analyze. But as far as I know, there are no tree towers proximate to this area.
And in none of these other communities either were there towers that look like this. So we really have no examples to look to that are truly the same situation that we're dealing with here.
In terms of a value impact?
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
So there's not a good comparable situation.
Well, I mean, I guess my thought would be, I guess my expectation would be that if there were a negative impact, it would be more likely for there to be such an impact with a conventional monopole industrial type tower versus one that's disguised. So I would think that, I guess that would be my expectation would be that there would be a more adverse effect if there was one to a standard tower versus one that's disguised.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for this person before you let him sit down? All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I have a question for staff. Has the city made any effort, or would it be appropriate for the city to look into what might be alternative appropriate sites that could be put forward in a situation like this?
I can answer the question that we have not done that. I think it's difficult for the city to do that without having the proprietary data to understand where a tower may be needed. we've only seen the evidence that we've had submitted through this commission over the last few years. We have very detailed requirements in the zoning ordinance that outline preferred sites, and you have to go through each one of those preferences before you get to a new tower and a new concealed tower. As the applicant walked through earlier, preferred to be in commercial zones as opposed to residential zones. I don't think it's the city's function to locate new tower sites. We certainly incentivize them to go on existing towers, water towers, and to go in commercial zones before residential zones.
Another question for staff. Was there any inquiry made to our emergency services as to whether or not they were concerned about the ability of people to make calls in the future?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not directly, but the fire department and the police department, they get the reviews for these applications. So usually that's the opportunity for them to chime in if there are any issues, and we didn't receive any specific information about that from them at that time.
No, I don't. It seems to me they would be more likely to make sure to chime in if they thought there was going to be a downgrading of ability to respond or some kind of additional threat, and not so much if they thought something, well, this is going to be great, but that doesn't necessarily indicate that there is a concern that there's a problem if it doesn't happen. I would certainly be interested to know, since safety is a big part of your argument, whether or not our safety folks feel that this is going to be a need or is currently a need. As you said, this is already a degraded service within our community.
Yeah, they didn't provide any information to us at that time when the application was under review.
And I wonder, I don't understand, but I hear your statement about proprietary data and Jesse's statement about proprietary data. But for the sake of the community, you're trying to win over residents, would it be possible to provide any, to do your own surveying of the residents to find out whether or not they were having an issue with service, or whether they had concerns about things like dropped calls or not being able to dial 911, so that you might have something in support of your statements that you could share?
Commissioner, Verizon has a very tough job. They're trying to build sites and maintain a network. If they solicited from the public their thoughts on being able to build sites, that's a very difficult task. The code is very, very specific and very thorough on what is required, and we have submitted that. We submitted an RF affidavit with a ton of detail on why it's needed. I've never been asked by any jurisdiction to provide what you're requesting. They do request RF affidavit and testimony, which we have done. So to allude that Verizon is not being truthful with it, I don't know if that's fair.
That is not what I said, sir.
I hope not, because they are very serious about their network, and they're very serious about keeping their subscribers happy. And what they've stated in this application is that they need the site, and they showed it to you.
So the answer is no.
I can't provide that data, and it's not even a requirement per the code.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, John.
You lean into what's required in the code a lot.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like that's the magical path to approval. Each of these sites that you come and request have specific attributes that are not in the code, whether the proximity to whatever, to different types of real estate, different land attributes that we have to consider, because each case stands on its own. And I don't believe if we approve this site that we're setting precedent, because we will consider the next site for all the attributes that are unique to that request. So I'm not worried about setting a precedent. But I also think you're doing a disservice to yourself. Verizon, we talk about proprietary data. And I'm sure they have a business they have to run, and they can only share so much. I cannot fathom or cannot understand why you couldn't put it in a form that Jesse could put down for us that's basic supply, demand, forecasting. That's not going to give up your secret to Sprint or T-Mobile. It's going to allow the commission, and it's going to allow residents to understand how we made this decision and why we made this decision without hiding behind, don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain, right? You're just doing yourself a disservice when you do that. And to say we're going to give up our secrets to our competitors just doesn't hold water for me.
Unfortunately, again, Ari Rosenthal on
Right.
behalf of Verizon. It just doesn't work that way in the real world, unfortunately, and because it's such a competitive market, it is.
Yeah.
And if, in fact, they allow their proprietary data to be basically published out there, their competitors not only will use it, but will use it to try and block them from acquiring sites, to prevent them from getting customers or to hopefully lose customers. So that's one of the main reasons
Right.
why they're very protective of that proprietary data. And they're not being, when you say, they're being transparent in the sense that the affidavit makes clear that this is the areas that they've targeted, that they're saying that they're having not only difficulties with. What you're seeing is a map. That
Right.
map, the colors,
Right.
is just coverage.
Right.
You're also talking about capacity. Capacity isn't
Right.
even shown on that.
Right.
But as he stated in the affidavit, and you heard him say, you've got 6 sectors, of which 4 of which are already exhausted in this area.
Right.
So, and that's what you're not seeing on the maps, is the capacity issue. And that capacity is, you may think that it's not affecting people, but it is at this point in time.
Okay, I guess what I'm saying is, and I'm not insinuating that you need to reveal any proprietary data. I fully respect that. What I'm saying is you can package it and give an example that here's a node, or here's a cell or a sector, and this is what we're seeing. This does this, and it allows people to understand it and maybe have some empathy for what you're trying to request. Right now, what we're hearing is, no, we're not going to tell you that because you can't know that. And that rubs people the wrong way.
Well, I guess what we're saying is, irrespective of the underlying data that they may use to get that,
Yeah.
we're showing you the actual result of the map
Right.
search that they do. And that is showing that you've got coverage issues. You
Right.
clearly have coverage issues.
I understand that, but I'm just saying that if you could, it doesn't have to be the exact example, but it can be an illustrative of what you're dealing with so that the layman and the residents can understand better what drives this and how far out in the future. We think that if we don't do something in 2.5 years, back to Commissioner Moran's question that didn't really get answered, is how far out do you think we might sense some friction here with your service? Is it 2 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 15 years? Just
Right. No, I
those
get
types
that.
of things for people to understand, because if it's 2 years and we don't do something now to build a tower, we're going to have problems. If it's 10 years, maybe now is not, you don't absolutely have to have the tower today.
I think I could say that if you've lost 4 of your 6 sectors in that area, you're basically losing it now. You don't have a lot of time from
That's
that
imminent.
standpoint.
Okay, but those types of things, just instead of hiding behind, or referring to the code, and we've met the code, so,
I apologize, Commissioner. I thought the RF affidavit spelled it out, so I didn't mean to be,
I think it's good, but it's fair for us to ask questions
Sure.
from that affidavit to get more data, to dig deeper for the residents, for
Absolutely.
ourselves, because we're going to have to vote on this.
absolutely,
So-
no.
Michael, I think I've been ignoring you. I'm sorry.
Just had a question that kind of comes back off that obsolescence question before. So one of the attributes you said of this site is all the existing mature foliage that makes this supports this type of use. So who's responsible for that foliage? I think in terms of maintaining it, if that went away, it would appear very differently. And I think that probably most of that is not on the area that you're leasing. How would that be maintained and or replaced over the term?
That's a very good question. When you mean the foliage on the monopine itself or the surrounding on the ground?
Surrounding.
On the ground. Well, I think that would probably be a question for Chayton, because you've had antenna facilities with landscaping for 20 years in Geneva. How do you police the landscaping now? I would imagine I'm involved in these modifications of these sites, that we submit applications to swap out antennas or cabinets, as you know, all the time. And that time, typically, the city says, hey, you know what, this fence looks bad, I want you to replace the fence, or I want you to replace the landscaping. That's what I see. Do you agree with that?
I mean, I think what Commissioner Slivka is getting at is there are very mature, tall trees around, and if for some reason those were damaged in an ice storm or something, like those were to come down, how...
Oh, is that what you mean?
Yes, primarily problems
Well-
with that landscape.
That's-
Or even over time, as one ages, and maybe it's only one tree, but, is how do you keep that very mature, very tall, integral part of this design in place?
Well, we can't be responsible for the maintenance of the existing trees on the property. That would be the property owner, just like any other property that's in Geneva. If we are adding, for any of the new vegetation that we're adding, Verizon would be responsible for that. And when we come in for permits for upgrades throughout the life of the agreement, that's typically when the municipality say, hey, by the way, that wood fence pretty weathered, I'd like you to replace it. Sure. Hey, those arborvitaes died, they got wind burn, I want you to replace those. Sure, no problem. But as far as the 40 to 60 foot trees that are there, they can't be responsible for that. That would be on the property owner.
And the property owner, or this woman, if she sells it, it sounds like she's elderly and that might not be that far off, could come in and clear them. Intention doesn't have to be an ice storm. If they wanted to do something different, more parking, whatever.
I would imagine that would be a zoning requirement, wouldn't I?
The city does have a tree preservation ordinance
That would prevent
for
someone from clearing them
properties
intentionally?
over an acre and a half, which I would have to verify that this is, but I
Yes.
believe it is. They would require a tree removal permit to start clearing
Good.
Right.
trees from the site.
Tim?
Just a comment to follow up on both Commissioner Evans and Commissioner Mead's thoughts. I understand proprietary data. I understand your unwillingness and frankly legal obligation not to disclose certain things, but it leaves us only with the anecdotal data, the anecdotal evidence that the community has brought to us tonight, a number of whom have indicated they're Verizon customers, that they're not having a problem from their basement, from their porch. It also causes us to draw negative inferences, for instance, from the businesses that you have put emphasis on that would benefit from this. The comments, they're not here indicating a need for it. City services aren't here or haven't provided any written evidence saying they need it. Even the owner of the Oscar Swan isn't here saying that this would be a benefit to them too. Now that I would take with a little grain of salt because that person is going to get some rent from putting up the tower. But the couple of businesses next to this, the B1, and the B1 is not who's sitting in this audience, by the way. It's the folks that live behind it who are going to have a rather tangential effect, but an effect nonetheless. So without the data that Commissioner Mims and Commissioner Mead have asked for, I can't draw any other conclusion, especially since, as Commissioner Mead pointed out, you never did answer my question about the event horizon. Where and when is the crisis point? And so without that data, I'm struggling to see the need for this.
Well, there's a detailed RF affidavit that tells exactly why they need the coverage, where they need the coverage. They talk about including but not limited to Route 38, 21,000 vehicles a day, according to 2020 traffic study by Geneva Engineering Division. Randall Road serves 32,000 a day. Geneva Commons Shopping Center, the surrounding roads, neighborhoods, retail, dining, business, community within the proximity of the site. They detail why they need it. It's the sectors jamming up. I guess I feel like I keep coming back to the RF affidavit and the maps, and I feel like it's pretty convincing. He has stated that he needs it now, and that it will only get worse over time. So I guess I'm a little confused on what else you would want to see, Commissioner, besides the data that our attorney has already said that I've never seen a carrier provide that specific data with an application like this. It's always sworn testimony, which Jesse was here about this evening earlier, and the information that was submitted and signed off by your staff and your third-party consultant.
And understand, and I think this is becoming a somewhat circular conversation, but I think what we're looking for is some data of the number, amount, and frequency of dropped calls, of inability to complete calls, of inability particularly to complete emergency calls. So the macro data that you're providing, I do understand. But what we have to contend with is the micro data that's being presented here that shows a different face of this argument.
I guess I would like to ask Shaden, because Shaden, we've been working on this application for months that we submitted and kicked back and submitted and kicked back and submitted. And not one time was it ever requested to submit drop call data as part of a requirement to meet the special use. Is that true?
That is correct.
Has that ever been part of a requirement for a special use facility in the city of Geneva?
Not in my time here.
I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
I will say that, as I recall, the last request along Bent Tree, we pushed for some of that and got the same kind of stiff arm, so.
Yeah.
I think there were other deficiencies in.
Oh, I agree, but I
that-
think we had this, it's not like we've never asked for that before as a
Yeah,
commission.
I mean, again, it's private business information.
Right.
So, we can only go so far as a government agency. We can't pry into their
Right.
business.
Yeah.
Like, just like we can't pry into other people's private or public business, right? You can't do it. So, any other questions other than dealing with that aspect of the application?
Somebody mentioned the gentleman that was from Cityscape providing density. I'm assuming this tree is three-dimensional, because all I see is the picture, so it's not going to be like a,
Right.
I think we saw a photo.
a scented Christmas tree hanging from my car mirror or
I
something.
think we saw a photo of the,
It's,
John, in the last one, we saw a photo.
yeah, I think so,
I
but
mean,
it's
they
three-dimensional,
showed it.
so I'm
I
wondering.
mean, I don't know if it's the
What-
same type,
what-
but it's.
Can you comment on density? He said you can increase density and add more branches to make it that much more palatable visually.
They're going to want this to look good. I can tell you they're not going to. I mean, they have to work with a very specific company called Stealth builds these.
Okay.
So they're going to be working with Stealth and making sure that they provide a great monopine tower. And you could make a requirement with the building permit review, because we can't order that tower to be made until we get zoning approval, but you could make a requirement that, we share that initial preliminary CDs with your building permit department to make sure that they sign off on the density of the tower. Be happy to do that.
Right.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
Move to close the public hearing?
Moran, second.
Moved and seconded. Jake, please call a roll.
Mead.
Aye. Sorry.
Evans.
Evans, aye.
Slivka.
Slivka, aye.
Moran.
Moran, aye.
Stocking.
Stocking eye. All right. So the amendment question is number one.
Three things. We have a person in the audience requested we make an amendment, one of the residents, to the city staff report to adjust the time to 10:48. I think we can do that at some point,
I
right?
think that's,
Jake?
I think she
But I'm
just
just-
made the change.
No, you're right. That's what I'm saying. I'm just keeping track of that. And then I do think, since we're making the motion in the affirmative, we should add the condition that there's no light and that density of branches be satisfactory to city staff.
That would be on the special use condition.
Correct, yes, yes.
We have to deal with the amendment to the PUD.
Correct, separate issue.
I think
These
that has
these
to
are
be-
both, these are both on the second motion.
Yeah. So what's the commission's thoughts on the amendment to the PUD? When was this PUD done, David, approximately? When was it?
I believe it was 1986.
1986.
87.
1987, it's been in effect since 1987, and the subdivision is built out. Yes, Tim?
Mr. Chairman, is motion in order at this point?
Well, I think we should talk about that, because I think it's critical. These people purchased their homes based on a PUD that was done in 1987. They have investment-backed expectations that there were going to be special permits in this PUD.
Mr. Chairman, if I might then,
Mhm.
there are two requests made tonight. And
Right.
if the first isn't passed, I don't think we ever get to the second one. The first is a request to amend the PUD,
Correct.
Blackberry PUD, which provides no special uses and has so provided since 1987.
Correct.
So, first of all, I think that's a tough burden to overcome. It's not impossible. We've seen it here. We saw it recently, industrial development over on the east side. But those PUD amendments are for purposes which benefit the underlying zoning itself. Here, even city staff indicates that this use would be at best described as ancillary. In my mind, it does not fit commercial service retail office, the underlying purpose of this PUD. And so I never get to the question of a special use. I don't see granting this request for an amendment to the PUD. I just don't see it. No special use. There's a reason for that. It's because this little pocket of commercial backs up to a mostly residential area, and it's supposed to be kept that way.
Good point.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Tim, because I wondered about that from the very beginning, about, that served a purpose, having that in there.
Right. So if you're a person who's purchasing property
Correct.
adjacent to that PUD, it's not going to dramatically alter by a special permit. You'd have to rezone it or a permitted use within a B1 district. And it's been that way since the beginning of time, basically. You know, since the subdivision. This is Blackberry subdivision's been adopted. So I have a hard time with that. I have a real hard time with that because, again, it's been standing in a long period of time and people have expectations based on that. Michael?
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that's the most difficult part of this question. the most difficult aspect of it. Yes, things change, but, the amount of time and decisions that people have relied on. So I think that's the hardest part for me.
I would also agree. I think the key is, Commissioner Moran indicated, is the difference between primary use and ancillary use. And it's not like we're looking for a specific use that's currently prohibited in B1 and adding that to the primary use of under the zoning. We're asking for is essentially a specific special use for a utility site, an ancillary use that does not tie in any way with the primary use of under B1 zoning.
It does not. It does not tie into the
Does not.
primary use.
Right.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, is a motion proper now that we've talked about?
As long as unless the commissioners wish to debate it further, I think we can do a motion.
In keeping with our custom of making motions in the affirmative, I would move to approve the amendment to the Blackberry Planned Unit Development for the purpose of seeking a special use in accordance with the findings of fact of staff.
Mead, second.
Chayton, call roll.
Evans,
Evans, nay.
Slivka,
Slivka, nay.
Moran,
Moran, nay.
Stocking,
Stocking, nay.
Mead.
Mead, nay.
All right. I don't even think we can have to do number 2. Do we have to, Chayton?
The commission is a recommending body, so I do think you need to make a recommendation on both requests.
That's true.
The city council can still overturn.
That's right.
I will make it, if that's okay, and add those 2 conditions, just in case it gets to city council and is considered differently. I'd like to make a motion that a special use be approved to erect a 100-foot concealed wireless communication tower at 1800 West State Street in accordance with Section 11-3-12 and Section 11-14-4 of the Geneva Zoning Code, subject to the findings of fact contained in the staff report.
John, one moment. Chayton wanted to mention one on the other section.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Change,
So it
just
was-
in case we want to do it.
So Ben Evans of Cityscape did mention Section 6409 that permits an additional 20 feet of height on the tower.
Yes.
So if that is, if we want to cap it at 100 feet.
Third condition.
That's a
Yeah.
third
Gotcha,
condition.
gotcha. I'm going to start over.
That's a good catch. I
I'm
just
gonna
want to make sure we get it in the motion.
I'm not going to reference the section number, but I'm going to mention a cap on the height.
That's fine.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve a special use to erect a 100-foot concealed wireless communication tower at 1800 West State Street in accordance with Section 11-3-12 wireless communication facilities and Section 11-14-4 special use permits of the Geneva zoning ordinance in subject to the findings of fact contained in the staff report and further subject to hang on. Further subject to a maximum height for said tower of 100 feet in total. Also, I lost my notes over the other 2.
Is that a fourth condition?
No lights on the tower, and that the density of the branches be approved by city staff during the permitting process.
Second, Evans?
That motion has moved and seconded. Chayton?
Slivka,
Slivka, nay.
Evans,
Evans, nay.
Mead,
Mead, nay.
Stocking,
Stocking, nay.
Moran.
Moran, nay.
All right. Thank everyone for being here, and that's fine. Thank you.
Well, don't you have to tell them when it's going to city council? They don't care.
Last time they withdrew it, this time.
It's a different guy though. Last time there was a guy sitting in his room in suburban St. Louis.
Right. Since we have online.
Remember that? And he was in his room and he was arrogant. And he was
Yeah, we're not done yet.
Well, he said something like, "You have to approve."
Public hearing's done.
He was. He started off
Thank you, appreciate it.
great, but then as soon as he started thinking on his feet,
Very defensive.
yes.
All right, still got a couple items on the agenda that we have to do because we're also online. So item number 6 is public comment. City Hall's pretty much cleared out, so
They're
not going to
done.
be here, anybody in the audience asking questions. So is there anyone online who wishes to address the commission? Please do so now. Use the raise hand function, and we will recognize you to comment.
We're
No, we're
adjourning.
not. We're still got a couple things we got to do on our
We're
agenda.
probably
Not
2
quite there
minutes.
yet.
So I don't even know if there's anybody online still, but no one? Okay, so we can move on to other business.
Okay.
Super busy.
Yes, so this will go to, this recommendations this evening will go to city council on, let's see real quick.
I would say, sorry, tentatively, it would be August 1st, but we will have to confirm that. It would be probably the 1st or the 8th.
Yes. Other than that, we have a few applications that are being reviewed by staff. One of the applications, which is a proposed variation for a third driveway approach on a single-family detached property at 1258 Meadows. They're also seeking lot coverage variation to increase their lot coverage from 35% to 38.13%. That will be coming to the Planning and Zoning Commission at our July 28th meeting. Other than that, I don't think the other applications are ready for public hearing at this time, but they'll be making their way sooner or later.
Okay.
Cool.
Looking ahead, I will miss the first meeting in August if there is one.
Okay.
I'll be out of town.
Okay. And I want to greet Matt. Welcome to the
Hey, Matt.
staff.
Welcome.
Thank you. And had a good baptism of fire this evening, so. Welcome to Geneva. What happened to our gentleman who had the garage variance? Did that go to council or?
The garage variance, would that be 427 Fulton Street?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It got approved.
Yes. that did
Keep
go-
driving by, waiting for it to see some activity.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. And also the even flow sign variation, it was intended to go to city council on the 5th of July, but there was miscommunication and it was left off the agenda, so it'll be presented to city council on the 18th on Monday.
Okay.
Jane, can I ask the garage variation? So we approved just the garage and not the shop. Is that what the city council approved?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No, I think they approved as submitted.
They approved it as submitted.
Oh, they did?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
There was some concern about the extended portion, but I think the consensus obviously won out that
Okay.
approved as submitted.
Interesting.
It was a while ago, so I apparently forgot, but
I know I, like John, have driven by it a few times. I haven't seen any activity over
No.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's nothing going on, but I'm just wondering what council did on that. Okay, anything else? And that's it.
Dunkin' Donuts?
I don't have anything.
Well, again, that's what that's like Min saying adjourn, you know. Like we have to have that
They have
as
to
a
have that.
standard thing. The comedy of errors, that is.
Oh, man.
Okay.
Looking forward to it in 2024.
Move to adjourn.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, guys.